Hello, I'm not sure if anyone's there already. Just thought I'll start doing this just a second earlier. Okay, seems we've got 3 people online already. So hello. Good to have you there. Just let me know if everything's okay, if you can hear me, if the sound is okay. I never know when it's good or not. Of course, I checked before before anything happened, before I started streaming. I checked the volume, I checked everything, but still, I'm not doing it quite often, so I tend to have problems with my equipment from time to time, and it's difficult to set it up every time. So that's what happens actually when you have a computer for the same stuff, for game dev, for streaming, for playing games. That's what happens. Just let me know. Okay. I'll wait for some more time. Actually, I can see that I'm sure who's there, who's listening in. I just wanted to get everybody on board before I start doing this, especially that this stream is dedicated for a bunch of people from my Facebook group. So yeah, hello, hello Pinpinax. Can you tell me if everything's okay, if the sound is okay, if you can hear me loud and clear, and if everything is okay, or should I tweak this a little bit more before actually I start getting okie dokie. So today's stream is about weird games of the 90s, as everybody voted on the Facebook group. So following this, we'll have a little bit of an interesting time because of the fact that the word weird is quite ambiguous. Before I start, I just wanted to tell you also that I'm using the background music that's of course correlated in some way to those games that we'll be talking about. And so for example, the current tune in the background is from the Cannon Fodder game, which we'll talk about a little bit later on, and why it's weird. So and some more things as well. So without further ado, let's get on with it, and we'll see. Hello. So a little bit of introduction about what it is, why weird games, what do I really mean about saying weird. So I stated this several times already, but weird is so subjective a term, and very often it has while being used in a common like the regular conversations, it has a negative meaning. Of course, depending on the speaker and the context. But I just wanted to assure you that everything that we'll try to talk about and whatever I will try to. Okay, maybe music is a little too loud. Okay, let's just tune it down a little. It's not a problem. Okay. Maybe it's good now. I'm sure. Let me know. So I tuned the music down a little. Hopefully it's better now. If not, let me know. Still a little. Okay. Yeah, that happens. Let me know. Right. Okay, that happens when you have multiple tunes in the background, all which are with different volumes. So that's what it is. Okay. What I just wanted to mention that this weird word is, we'll try to be very positive about it. And as you know perfectly, the people, like there are various people and people change with time. So weird is still being unfortunately used by with by people who want to describe, for example, LGBTQ groups and people, especially by homophobes and so on. So basically, these are potentially sensitive subjects. But I just wanted to assure you that I hope everybody is welcoming in this environment that we have on the group, and especially for sure I am. So hopefully, but what I wanted to say is that weird. There was this distinct period during the 90s which made a huge breakthrough in video games when it comes to the LGBTQ issues. And what I wanted to address in this presentation also is how the weird, what was weird or like considered weird before, became a norm, as it should be actually, and what was the transition. And because it's quite interesting to see that this like embedded bigotry of people, it doesn't matter if it's Western or Eastern culture really, it was embedded to some extent. And also the video game industry had to fight it a little bit, and had to tweak a little bit with some ways of introducing that content. So this is something that we'll talk about several games that did that breakthrough. I'm not sure if like everybody who played Mass Effect or Dragon Age or whatever games are new knows that this is a perfectly normal thing right now in video games, that all the potential groups or groups or interests are being represented in games. But it wasn't so in the 90s. It started to be like that after some time. Okay, the music changed, so it might be that I need to tune a little bit down. Okay. So another thing is that in majority we were concentrating on the adventure games and RPG games before, but because this subject is so extensive, I mean this weird games subject, I decided to pull some other genres into the picture, because the weirdness is also because those games are cross-genre in many ways. So that's one other aspect of those weird games. Another thing is that I wanted to exclude majority of the Japanese games, because everybody probably knows that Japanese are experimenting a lot, and were experimenting back in the 80s and the 90s with all the genre crossovers. So, and of course there's this distinct way of looking at what the fantasy is in Japan and in the Western world, which is very different. So by definition, the Japanese games are weird for Western audience, and that's because for like Japanese perspective on games is a perspective on trying to very different elements and mixing those elements together, like you know what I mean, completely unrealistic huge swords that couldn't be possibly worn by anybody with some realistic elements. Or my favorite example, like enemies in the Kiseki series, so Trails in the Sky series, where the enemies are actually, you can actually in one of those games meet a sheep, an animal who's very angry kung fu fighter. So this kind of like kung fu fighting sheep, it's not something that could happen in Western world, because the Western world, of course, is more. The expectation is that the fantasy world has to be realistic to some extent, to be believable with some fantasy elements. So we know that this Japanese element makes the games weird in Western eyes. So I just wanted to skip that because that's not the point. Just to compare what's weird and what's not between two different geographical and cultural areas. So and to do that, because that's a difficult task, I just wanted to divide those games into three groups. And this division is, of course, highly subjective again, and very probably not truthful. But one needs to generalize to approach any subject sometimes. So, weirdness in the setting is the first thing, first group. The second group is weirdness in the storyline, and the third group is weirdness in mechanics. So they of course intertwined, because the best games are like complex and consistent on every level. So sometimes when you have weirdness of the mechanics, it corresponds to the weirdness of the setting and the weirdness of the storyline. So for example, if you're playing a weird game with weird characters and weird people and weird setting, you kind of expect the weird storyline and the weird UI elements, for example, because this is the complex and the whole experience out of it. So, and that's what I wanted to do. So we'll see how it will go. So let's start going there. Another thing is that we know that in the 80s, in the 8-bit computer era, we had a lot of experimentation with what video games are and what those games should be, and the genres were not established; they were being established at the time. So let's exclude 80-bit era, because from the 8-bit era, probably every game has some weird elements to it. I pasted several screenshots there, like Miecze Waldgira, which is one of the weird Atari XL Polish games from the 80s, 90s era, which is very weird when it comes to its setting and the character. And of course this logical weird isometric thing is called Spin Dizzy. Yeah, it's like a game about spinning object that just goes through levels and picks up objects and tries to get through the level to some exit, and that's very there were a lot of those, and let's just skip those, because then we wouldn't be able to address anything, and we wouldn't be able to talk about those games in any reasonable time. So the music that you can hear in the background right now, if you can hear that music because of the volume tweaking, I'm not sure right now, is The Shadow of the Beast. So The Shadow of the Beast is a game from the 90s, created by a bunch of Englishmen from Newcastle area, in a company called Psygnosis. And it started to be a huge thing, a trilogy of games, and some kind of offshoot games that were spawned from that. And this game is weird because this is a like side-scroller platformer with arcade elements and combat and a lot of logical puzzles as well. But those logical puzzles are based on in the first game. It's based mostly about on the fact that you need to pick the specific ladders, you need to explore correctly, or get into correct places, or turn levers in some correct order, and then fight enemies and go forward. In next games, in the second and the third part, it's more those logical puzzles start to be really challenging in some cases. What's weird about those games? The setting. The setting is absolutely like nothing I have seen before. So the very first thing that maybe it's visible on those screenshots there is that the background features some weird mountains with weird arcs made of stone. This is the geographical element that is not like, it's absolutely unreal. Nothing like that exists on this planet, and this is something that sets up the mood. And there is a lot of more elements in that game which are weird. Like, take a look at this monstrous architecture that's in the background. There's a lot of examples in this game of that architecture. So the first level is the world itself. The world is unrealistically built, but by some weird erosion which could not happen in a non-magical world. The second is that, can you see those mushrooms on the picture on the screenshots from the second game? These are actually absolutely like weird places. The second is this architecture, which is absolutely monstrous, absolutely immediately provides a feeling of that this architecture could not be built by men. This is not possible that humankind could create this. And the game doesn't explain you who built that and why. The game lets player explore and follow and learn by looking at this. I wanted to point your attention to this zeppelin on the sky in the first game, where you see there is some technology there as well, and this technology is operated by someone, and you don't really know by whom. The next thing is the hero. The hero, called Arbron, is a person turned into beast. So that's hence the name Shadow of the Beast. Arbron in the first game is, like you can see, this grayish devil. In the second game, he's being turned to human once again, and in the third game he's more equipped and fighting evil, so to speak. So he looks completely human, and the transition is complete. I just wanted also to point your view on and attention to this screenshot on the bottom right. So this Apollo-like figure kneeling on the bench, suspended by two chains, holding a bird in a cage, and that bird shouting help. And what does the player do in this situation? So what is captured on this screenshot is actually a situation when the player wants to use the monster's head of the previously killed monster, and using some leverage there to free that bird. This bird is absolutely crucial to completing the game or this level, but this is how weird and how bizarre it gets at times. So I have a lot of questions, and I had a lot of questions while observing this scene. Like, who placed this bird in the cage? What's the idea behind it? Why is it so prepared? And why someone actually created a piece of architecture, a very bizarre architecture, to cage a bird? So if you're going to play, or if you play this game before, you can expect a lot of bizarre content like that throughout all the trilogy. So, and as Pinpinac says, the snail, the creep. So the snail, actually, in the second game, is one of the most powerful wizards. It's the only being capable of teleporting our protagonist to the land of Karamun. By the way, this game is difficult, not on very many levels, not only the logical puzzles or problems with the difficult monsters. It's also difficult because it doesn't have a save capability. So you go everything through everything in one go, or you're done. There were a lot of unwinnable situations from which uh, you could resolve only by restarting the game. Like in the second game, there were places. Also in the third game, there were places. Oh, in the first game as well. That if you did something wrongly, then it was an unwinnable situation, and you needed to experiment. It was a part of the fun of the game that you needed to go there and experiment. So, for example, in the third game, there was a room in which there was a wardrobe and a table, and you could use your weapons, like a shuriken that you can see on the bottom right picture, to destroy that table. If you did that, it's game over. Of course, game doesn't tell you that it's game over, but it is actually. Why? Because you need that table to use you need to like tear only one leg from that table to make a ramp out of the table, which will be later on used by some other object to be like shot out through the air. So the object goes on that ramp, and then the object goes in the air after it leaves the ramp, so to speak. In another level, there was a situation when you needed to use a table, which was equally destroyable, to float over the water that was poured to some chamber by moving some lever, and a lot of situations like those. So it was interesting and weird at the same time to explore who would actually create those puzzles, who would do so weird castles with those weird monsters and this weird architecture. And this is of course part of the story, because everything in this world is bestial. So let's switch to some more screenshots. Denizens of the world. So this monstrous person to the left is actually a tavern keeper in this world. To the right, you have a face of Arbron from the first game. So he's really a beast, a weird beast. And this newly looking screenshot is actually the remake, screenshot from the remake of the first game that's available on PlayStation 4. So you can play Shadow of the Beast to experience the remade world today in a fairly new game, and I advise you to do so. It's not maybe the best platformer or puzzle platformer you can find on the market, but it definitely shows the bizarreness of this world. What's more important about this bizarreness of this world and those stone arcs? Those are not accidentally placed by game designers. They were very focused on the artistry of one of the painters called Richard Dean, and this painter created a lot of paintings of floating islands and those stone arcs. So the interesting thing is when James Cameron created the Avatar movie, some Richard Dean fans were like PMing the artist that Cameron actually stole his content, which is, it's really very likely that Cameron was at least inspired by those floating islands from the inspired paintings. And the same goes with the Shadow of the Beast creators. These guys were really into that stuff. So on this screen you can see actually the cover drawn drawn by Richard Dean, because they asked him to do this for the second game at least. So those stone arcs, weird content, weird monsters, and of course this technology that I mentioned, that you can see an airplane, crashed airplane on in amidst some really weird ruins. I mean really weird ruins. So back then, when I played this game for the first time, which was about 25 years ago, it was like I needed to stop there. I needed to look at this plane, and I was wondering what the hell happened with that plane. Of course, there is a story behind that plane, and if you played all three games, then you kind of understand what happens with that plane. Actually, this is Arbron's plane. He crashed with that plane, and then you can explore it in the third game, although it was mentioned in the first. So that's what it is. But and some more screenshots about how bizarre enemies and how weird, creepy boss fights you have in this game. So really interesting stuff. Another game that was spawned kind of by the same company, based on the same technology, was Agony. And everybody knew Agony as an old game, because then this was just a left to right shooter when you flew as an owl. Actually, the story goes that Owl was a wizard turned into owl, and the owl needs to regain his shape and defeat the evil. So the owl and owl flies from left to right and combats anything that happens and everything that's being spawned. The thing is that again, because that's the same company and almost the same team behind Shadow of the Beast and Agony, it contains the same weirdness when it comes to enemies and the setting as well. What's worth mentioning is that game dev, especially English game dev in the old times, was really into demos scene as well. So the demos scene coders were also game designers. So a lot of the content created in those games was really an artistic content. So as you can see, there is a pixel art created by one of the demos scene game devs. Which is actually a loading screen for the first level, if I remember correctly. So that's the old game. Amiga was a magnificent computer, because it had incomparable at the time musical and graphical capabilities. So whatever was created before on the Commodore was ported and given next live in form of continuations or sequels on Amiga, and that's the situation with The Last Ninja. So what's the weirdness is a subject of our discussion today. So what's weird about the ninja game? You are a ninja. What can be weird? So the screenshots can explain you a little bit. So this is a ninja game when you have satanistic cults, and when you can find a Mitsubishi Zero fighter plane in some weird situation in game, and some weird bosses and weird creatures. Of course, there is a Japanese lore around it, because after all, it's a ninja game with logical puzzles and fighting and everything. But this is a very weird magical ninja game, and with some really interesting settings. Like, I'm not sure if somebody who created this Mitsubishi Zero there created this Mitsubishi Zero placed it at random. I know that there's in game dev there are some situations when you do some things just randomly because you feel it would be cool, and there's no explanation behind it. But even though if you're as a game dev, you create the content like that, and if you created something because you felt it would be cool and you have no other explanations, it sometimes makes your players to like spend for 1 hour next to that placed content that you just mindlessly put there, wondering what the hell is the story behind this damn airplane. And that's what I did, actually. It was so bizarre because everything was kind of Sengoku Jidai or medieval Japanese stuff in that game, and then you find the Mitsubishi Zero in actually weird place, which like pay attention to those planets in the background there. So like, where are we? This is like the universe, the end of the universe place with the Mitsubishi Zero, or the nexus of everything that's dead or undead. No explanation there. Just the overwhelming feeling of something really bizarre. Uh, so I've been asked multiple times if I'm going to put the games like Another World, that presentation. Yes, I will, and I did that. That's because this game is all about feeling of being estranged in a bizarre, weird, incomprehensible place. And the comprehension is one of the ways to survive there. So if you haven't played that game, this is a game from the 90s created by Eric Chahi. Eric Chahi was that guy that I mentioned during the Adventure Games presentation, who created this brownish building facade as a pixel artist. So he created Another World with a simple story. Lester, our protagonist, this red-headed guy, is a cool young professor working on physics, quantum physics, in some really cool secret laboratory. In the intro, he arrives with his Jaguar car, and then he tries to continue his work, but then something weird or bad happens in the laboratory, and he gets transported to this another world. So the screenshot to the left is the first screenshot from the game when he's actually spawned into some weird pool, and he swims out of this pool and sees that it's no longer Earth anymore. It's another world. And what the player doesn't know, because like it's tabula rasa on the beginning, player doesn't know anything. Player doesn't know that this world is extremely challenging and lethal, and actually you can die almost immediately in this game. Um, from the very beginning, when Lester comes out of this pool, some weird jaguar-like beast is observing him, and will hunt him, and will try to hunt him down. As worse as it gets, it's even worse, because on the way, Lester cannot just escape this situation, because there are some weird human-eating leeches on the way that are very difficult to kill and like insta kill the player. So there is a number of things, and on the way, Lester is being captured by some alien civilization. You can see the representative of that alien civilization, the second screenshot to the left. And the civ is extremely based, like very extreme, based on slavery, based on forced labor, very nasty civilization in that terms. And Lester escapes with help from a fellow alien. And the game is basically about the escaping from the alien prison in the very bizarre world filled with bizarre creatures and lethal situations. And I can spoil you the fact that it doesn't end well for Lester. Actually, Lester dies. And of course, the first game doesn't leaves you with a cliffhanger that if Lester is alive or not. He's being carried by his alien friend towards the horizon. Actually flies over the dragon's back, some weird pterodactyl-like creature. But Lester dies in the setting, and it's being explained. The second game there was a continuation that wasn't so popular, but Lester dies. He doesn't survive this experiment, and but so it's quite sad. The ending is quite sad, but it's the road here that matters, and the exploration of this weird and interesting arid landscape that you have in this game, with a weird alien laser pistol weapon, uh, weird cultural behaviors, like not also, maybe not so weird, because the player visits an alien harem, apparently what it is by mistake, and also the player is being put to some arena, like a coliseum like arena, during some event also. So those aliens are not so different from humans, but the world definitely is. uh, what many consider a continuation from another world, especially from the same people, is Flashback. And Flashback is a very similar game when it comes to this, to the mechanics. So jumping, side-scrolling, very nice animations at the time. Uh, Also science fiction, and based in science fiction, also by the same artist. Uh, so weirdness of Flashback is based on the fact that this is science fiction with some creativity in mind. What struck me immediately after starting playing that game is understanding that the very first level or levels of the game take place on the Titan, on the moon, which has a human colony in it. And the game creators thought that the colony itself needs to be like sustained by the produced oxygen. So they would create a whole level that is an artificial jungle that you can see on the left under the biodome. And this artificial jungle was so interesting. It's like plant and the metal combined, which I haven't seen at the time before. I haven't seen this mix of metal and plant-like beings just to produce oxygen. And of course, as it is with those games, with this idea of plant metal jungle comes the idea of outcasts living in this jungle, and there are people in the colony that are basically doing mining operations, and there are people that are living outside, some mutants and so on. Of course, this game is also an alien conspiracy game, and has an interesting plot when our protagonist loses his memories. So in the intro, we can see him being followed by some, or chased by some people who shot his vehicle down of this jungle, and he doesn't remember who he is. So the player doesn't either, and so the game is about reminding or remembering something very very important that almost got him killed. So that what he's trying to remember is that he uncovered the alien conspiracy, that aliens are actually infiltrating humankind on various planets and moons in the solar system, and actually the game ends also in some very nasty way, because our protagonist is being able to destroy the weird alien hatchery, but is also floating in the space vessel without hope of being discovered by anybody. So the next one is actually something that we discussed during the adventure games stream, which is Loom, and its weirdness I covered before. This is a highly musical game, so it's also weird mechanics there. That also features the weird setting and protagonist. So I told you before during this adventure game stream that this setting is actually a post-apocalyptic setting. It doesn't feel so, because it like you have a magical musician on a very weird island on which every denizen is being called a weaver. But and there is this hint that there are other islands, and other islands are different occupations like glassmakers, shepherds, and smiths, and so on. But what it doesn't tell you is that this world setup is because it's a highly destroyed and demolished world, and everything changed. So people, we not we don't really know if what's happening in this world is actually a magic or a very advanced technology. We don't, because as Arthur C. Clarke, the famous science fiction writer, said once, is that if you have, or if you're given with an impressive, highly advanced technology, is absolutely non-distinguishable from magic. And that's when you think about the medieval times, and if you just show those medieval people from, for example, 15th century your cell phone, they would think it's magic, and they couldn't know not think otherwise, really. And that's what I felt after some time in this game, that it's probably technology, really, but everything feels like magic, and I couldn't but like ponder the history of this world, which is only touched on the surface level in this game. But there was this deep thought and deep feeling that there is so much more to it, that if like one could spend long enough on those islands, maybe one could uncover some really interesting secrets there. But the world is weird. The protagonist is weird. So the weird about Bobbin Threadbare, so the protagonist, the weird is the fact that whoever looks under the Weaver's hood dies immediately. Why? What makes the Weaver so damn interesting, so damn lethal, that you just need to go to this guy that's weirdly looking gray robed Nazgul and just look under his hood to just be immediately killed. Why? What's under that robe? And the game never shows you what's under his robe. The only NPC who ever looks under Bobbin's robe dies immediately, and it's disintegrated. This NPC but just disappears, like he was never there. So there's a lot of weird situations and weird turns, like and plot twists there, like the connection of the protagonist to the swans, and Tchaikovsky's Swan Lake is the music theme of the whole game. That's because there's something about swans there, and the reality, and the shift, and tuning out reality, and there are swans on the other side, really. Swans living and swimming in the like how should I call it, celestial pond, in the same world with from which the embodiment of chaos comes. So a lot of weird stuff in there. I highly recommend you to play it. This is one of the adventure games that are must play. So about that pond that I just mentioned, I have a screenshot for it. So this is like a celestial pond with swans. There's a lot of interesting places. So some those graves, one cannot just can't but ponder who's been buried there and why, and what's the history of the first island, even though there's more than that. So great thing. Okay, the embodiment of weirdness, Lether Goddesses of Phobos. So the name of the game should give you a hint what it is and what's the feeling of it. So imagine the 1950s American science fiction movie. You know that the whole definition of the 1950s science fiction movie is weird by itself. You know, weird robots, laser guns. Almost everything has a Tron in its name, like I don't know, Sandwichotron or something. So this is this setting. Plus, this is extremely cheesy and erotic themed based game, uh, in which you have three protagonists, so three excluding like three playthroughs. If you pick Lydia, you have a different game. If you pick Zeke, you have a different game. And if you pick Barth, the alien, you have a different game. I mean, the events in that game are the same. Actually, the main plot is the same, but the point of view of each protagonist changes everything. So of course, the weirdest point of view is Barth's point of view because he's actually an alien with a problem because his flying saucer got damaged, and he or it actually, because I don't want to impose the gender on Barth because we have no damn bloody idea what gender it is actually. Um, so Barth is actually very weird. It looks at everything in very weird perspective, so alien perspective, and it just wants to find, or they just want to find, their mechanic to fix their flying saucer, which in like his or it is having a lot of luck because Zeke is actually an owner of the asteroid gas station, like in the 50s, right? Employing three beautiful attendants on this gas station, and it's really weird and really cheesy, and of course really simple at times, but nonetheless pleasant. I mean, it was a cool, nice experience to get through this game with all three playthroughs. So Zeke, the macho guy, and Lydia, the shy girl, the professor's daughter. It was really interesting to see the perspective. And there is, of course, a mechanic and a plot twist that brings all three protagonists together. So this is really interesting. It was really interesting and a very weird experience when it comes. So in other words, if 1950s science fiction are not weird for you, that maybe it's not going to be that weird. But for me, it was something different, really. And of course, worth mentioning that this approach is really like 1950s, so a lot of sexist content. So be warned. Cyberpunk. So I don't want to spend too much time on the cyberpunk settings because everybody's waiting for the cyberpunk 2077 this year, and it's like being talked over the media and covered as extensively. But back in the day, it was a thing, and the cyberpunk was a thing for pen and paper tabletop role players. But for other parts of the world, it was kind of weird. And the idea of having implants and mixing implants and changing the body and altering the body, it back in the day it was considered weird, and there was a lot of games that explored this content. One of those games is Rise of the Dragon. Uh, so inspired by Cyberpunk and Blade Runner, doomsday game in which protagonist needs to prevent the evil organization from destroying the world, and a lot of weird situations with unwinnable situations. Basically, the game is on the same engine that other game that's in this presentation was made in, which is Daughter of the Serpents. So it's kind of a weird adventure game mixed with some timed sequences. Nonetheless, kind of interesting because you had a variety of bizarre characters there, bizarre NPCs and some dialogues which are or can be actually quite fishy today, because we got so used to that kind of content. But back in the day, it was something. Speaking like because we're having that, weird flow of the futuristic science fiction content with a lot of uh, futuristic look. Speedball is absolutely worth mentioning. So this is a sports game, and Warhammer fans, of course, know things like Blood Bowl, which is a miniature game in which you play a very bloody sports game, orcs versus elves or something. Speedball is very similar, but this is, of course, an action game in which you are a manager of a sports team of the future of a very brutal sport called Speedball. And of course, it's a sport manager, so you manage your players, pensions, wages, and try to get the first place in the league. But what was bizarre about this game is the fact that everything in this game is so metallic. So can you see this UI, this stadium, everything, including our player's armor, is made of some weird chromatic metal, which made this feeling really, really um, barren, so to speak. No vegetation anywhere. Everything is so cold and brutal there, and that feeling, as you can see, this player's armor, it's not even regular. It's like asymmetric in some places. So this asymmetry of visual representation makes this game different or weird. So and the feeling is equal. So really worth mentioning. There's more footage or like more pictures that could probably show you more parts of how bizarre this setting is, but I just decided to put only those three there. Another weirdness of the setting is more crazy or wacky, so to speak. So there was a game called like for ski, yeah, ski or die. So the subject and the title itself is wacky enough. It's like extremely edgy, ski or die, and yeah, it sounds like our skiing trip. That's true, but this is actually a game about quite crazy skiing fans, because there is a multitude of non-regular ski disciplines. Downhill is not just downhill. Of course, this is like acrobatic downhill with jumps over leverages and so on. So this is like this extreme downhill. The same goes for the snowboard half pipe. The same goes even there is even a snowball fight in this game, which is actually quite crazy and very very serious. Like you would be in a, I don't know, wartime trenches of sorts. And look at the Rodney and the manager of his skiing shop. This guy looks crazy and weird, and everybody is like punk like, has like punk like visage in this game. So like it kind of can be summarized like if you got a bunch of punk rock or punk fans and gave them skis and snowboards. This is actually what's happening there, and everything is wacky in this game and weird. So the non-regular ski game really deserving to be among all those weird games. This one is extremely important for video games in general, because what you have here is one of the very first yeah, Star Trek Gowron's Eyes, Rod Stewart. Yeah, so something like that. Yeah, definitely. But about Megalomania. So this is the very first real-time strategy game, I think, or at least one of the very first ones. So this is also kind of a god game because you have four aliens or godlike entities: Scarlet, Oberon, Caesar, and Madcap, which by mistake or by pure chance find a new world in the vast expanses of space. And on that world, there's a new undeveloped race of creatures, human like. And those four entities start to fight for dominance over this race. And they, of course, present themselves as gods. So, this is, like I said, the real time strategy. Uh, and the setting, of course, goes through this historical uh, stages of development for those humans. So there's nothing weird about this ancient, medieval, then industrial revolution times. But what's weird is the fact that you're actually playing not the people, you're playing a god. A weird space creature, and it kind of feels all the time. Especially it feels so in one of the ages or stages of the game in which you can freeze your people to some weird coffins to reuse those frozen people during the last level of the game. And this is like so detached from human ways of thinking. At least it seemed so at the time. That actually made this setting quite bizarre. So, and of course, I don't need to tell you that the UI representation makes this feel really astral, so to speak. So here you have Megalomania. And of course, if you read the Amber Chronicles by Roger Zelazny, you probably could feel, you got the feeling, at least the Oberon's feeling there. So, Sensible Software, known for their tiny pixel people from very many games like Sensible Soccer and so on, created this cannon fodder game. And this is not only weird because of the setting, it was also weird because of the mechanics in which you use the mouse to drive your platoon to fight the enemies in the modern battlefields. And actually, the game is about war and shooting and has this weird top-down representation and weird UI and maybe weird mechanics as well. But what's the most important thing is that it's one of the first games that tried to show how stupid and horrible war is, because it showed the like the picture stands for 1,000 words, so you can see how this queue of people to the right. This line is the line of your recruits before actually they are getting included in your army. And next to them there is this green hill covered with the graves of the recruits that already died for your cause. And of course, in this game there's some cool funny music. Let me just I played it at the beginning of the stream, but the main title tune of the game says war never been so much fun, war never been so much fun, go to your brother, kill him with your gun, baby dying in the uniform, dying in the sun. So this is actually like a fun approach to it, but also a pastiche on how stupid this is. And the only thing is that we can do about looking at war is just to consider it's just stupid. And the fact that player is actually playing this game should make the player feel kind of weird. This dissonance between how the game itself is really fun and really fun to play, and the subject of the game is actually getting your people dead for the goal that you don't even care about. They just dying for somebody's set up missions. So this feeling was really, really bizarre and weird at the time, and it still is. This game still stands and still brings this message, and this message still breaks through. So really memorable content. I promised you some time ago that I will talk about some weird French games, and for some reason, the French game dev studios, and not only game dev studios, French creators have this really detached from the others point of view. Uh, Consider, I'm not sure if you ever watched any movie by Jeunet, like the Amélie or Delicatessen or City of the Lost Children. I'm not sure if you ever read comic books like the Search of the Bird of Time. This is absolutely weird, and this is the same weirdness that is being brought to those video games. At least it's really difficult to explain this weirdness. One can just feel it by playing the game. And the very first on our list today is the Storm Master. And Storm Master was a game that in which the player takes the role of a master of the winds in a very weird regime, in a very weird land and planet, on which everybody and everything is being powered by the wind. The winds are everything in it. By the way, there is a French author. I know that Pinpinax was writing a thesis on this called Antonio Damasio, and he created written a book that's probably non-translated to any other language apart from French, which is called La Horde du Contrevent, which is can be translated as the Horde against the Wind. And I can't but feel that Damasio written his book because he played this game, Storm Master. I'm not sure what was the first thing. Somebody was trying to create a game called the Windwalkers based on the Damasio's book, but I'm not sure what was the first thing. Damasio writing his book, The Horde du Contrevent, or this Storm Master game. I'd say that Storm Master was the first. And I strongly believe that Damasio was playing Storm Master, and that's why he actually wrote his book. Because Storm Master is really about the wind and really about governing a weird civilization that does everything with wind in their mind. So, and the game is having a weird mechanics because you're not only governing the civilization and your culture or your nation, but you also have the designers who construct the large airships in which there is actually a mini game. This is actually the very important part of the game, in which you construct the battleships. On the screenshots you can see the screen of the designer bench. A player wants to construct the ugly battleship, and that's the player choice. What are the sails used and components, and of course the design can be completely utterly wrong. So, and then you'll start losing battles because there are air battles in that game, and of course there are air wizards. Intro itself shows an air wizard calling the wind to power your windmills, and so Pinpirax says that Horde du Contrevent was published in 2004, so definitely later than this game, because this is from the 90s. So then there you have it. I suspect Alan Damasio for using this playing Storm Master, and a coincidence. Well, this is a French game, and Damasio is a French author. And Damasio, by the way, I believe everyone these days at least heard about Life is Strange video game. The Life is Strange actually is created by the Dontnod company, and Dontnod was founded also by Alain Damasio. So he's not estranged to the video game industry. He was a gamer, and he's also in the video games industry. So that's why I suspect him of playing Stormmaster. But this is like the strangeness of this game. Weird setting, weird culture, weird mechanics, because this is a strategy game with some weird elements which are arcade even. So this is very unique experience. And again, this same company, Silmarils, created another French company created another post-apo game, a weird setting, which is called Transarctica, known in the West, at least in in America, in the USA, as a Ice Baron, if I remember correctly, or something like that. So, in this game, you are a freedom fighter in the post-apocalyptic Earth. That's being this is a snowball Earth. There's no green anymore. Everything is ice now, and there is a evil organization called the Viking Union, which owns trains, and the trains are the only ways of communicating between places on Earth right now. The very veins, railways are the very veins of the last humanity, villages and places. So as you can see on the screenshot there, look at how Casablanca looks with mammoths. Look like how the Luxor in Egypt looks like. This is everything now. Everything is now icy. As you can see in the Luxor screenshot, there are slaves being traded. So the humanity like falls on its knees again. This is a post-apo completely. So there's this Viking Union, and the player is a freedom fighter. What's happening is that the player captures one of the Viking Union trains and starts organizing the resistance by governing that train. So another weird management game in which you trade commodities between places. You can even create your own railways if you have resources for it. You can have multiple wagons for livestock, for even troops on the train. So you can there is a part of the game which is actually a battle between two trains. So you can fight on the trains, and the most expensive and the most crucial commodity is coal. And so everybody's killing themselves for coal. Highly depressive. Of course, there is a way to win this game, and the winning of the game is also a hope for the Earth, because it's about turning on the last machinery created by some scientists to unfreeze the Earth. So there is a way of win-win situation for everybody, at least not for the Viking Union, which is defeated because they support slavery and so on. But so as the mammoths trains, troops, resistance, and snow-covered Egypt is actually weird enough. What's very important to add is that in those times, game devs had a lot of cool sense of humor, which probably end up today as it would probably annoy somebody today, because today we're living in a time in which everybody gets annoyed at something, and that's what it is. But in this game, when you wanted to quit the game, just exit the game to your desktop, not the desktop, but to the DOS prompt. You needed to go to this car that's visible on the bottom middle screenshot, click on the gun, which is there on the table, and commit suicide. That's what that was the only exit, and that's the game prompt would ask you, do you really want to kill yourself? Yes, and then you have it. So weirdness in the setting, Robinson's Requiem. This is again the same company. They mastered also the way of creating RPG games. So this game was mentioned during the RPG stream as a game that has probably one of the most extensive health management systems in RPG games ever, I think. Look at the screenshot to the left. How many potential items to cure something our protagonist has. So if the wild animal cut your arm, you needed to stitch your wound together with some needle and thread. You needed to disinfect the wound if you had alcohol or something. Everything could kill you in this game. But the weirdness of the setting is the main thing here. So the player is one of the Robinsons. So the team of trained to in survival in extreme environments, and this is a weird planet with some dinosaurs on it, or dinosaur-like creatures. The feeling of being estranged and the feeling of being alone, Robinson, on this absolutely horrible world waiting to kill you on every step you make, was really bizarre and weird experience. I cannot express enough how important it is for you adventure games fans to complete Kyrandia trilogy if you haven't already. This game is actually, if you love games like, if you love adventure games in general, if you love fairy tales, if you're a Harry Potter fan, this is something that you have to play, because I'm not saying it's like Harry Potter. It's different, definitely different. But you have mad wizards in it. Brandon is a wizard using. Okay, I need to confess something. So the company I created to release my game is called Gemlore. And that's because of the Kyrandia one, because that's exactly how the arts of magic Brandon uses is being called. So, yeah, this is something that I took from there. I was inspired by it because this is just a word, right? But yeah, that that was my inspiration. Um, Xantia is an alchemist, and Malcolm is a wizard jester. So actually, this is something very fun to experience. But where's the bizarre? Where's the weirdness in it? I mean, talking to the wooden house, talking or fighting an evil-looking squid or octopus on the beach, being choked by a bubble gum, fighting with a horribly looking toad on the swamp, traveling via the Pegasus on the world, or a big glove being the main tactician. Yes, I'm talking about a human-sized glove, white glove, looking like that. I didn't put a screenshot there. It would be good to have that screenshot there, but I just forgot about it. Which is a lead tactician against Kyrandia disappearing in the second game. I mean, the bunch of protagonists, the weird bunch is absolutely bizarre enough. And then you add the world and its setting, and there is a lot of I don't want to spoil too much, but in the second game, Xantia is being sent to is being told to explore the center of the world, like the core of the planet, to find something called an anchor stone. And this anchor stone is supposed to save the planet from disappearing, the land from disappearing, because it just disappears, it just disintegrates. And when the player reaches the core of the world, the player finds out that the core of the world is filled with little stones, each one in the shape of a little anchor, and there's like so many those anchor stones. It's not possible. It's not possibly the reason or the way of saving the planet. This item is so common that that something's fishy there, and that's the feeling of weirdness of that very moment and moment leading to that moment and after that moment is absolutely overwhelming. I highly recommend playing this if you haven't already. This is one of the milestones of adventure gaming in my book. Some extremes now. So everybody knows Richard Giger, who created the alien monster for Alien movies. So as an artist, he created many more things when he was alive, because he passed away several years or several decades ago. I think that he managed to create before he died. He created a restaurant in Switzerland. I'm not sure if it was in Lausanne, but it's made in this very style that you can see on this horrible picture there, and also created a microphone stand for Korn vocalist. Then he passed away, but he was his talents were used for this game, which is Darkseid, extremely dark, difficult adventure game with an unsettling atmosphere. And as far as Giger is concerned, everything is weird there. So I'll try not to explain what's on that picture there. Just look at it and imagine what can be happening. What's happening to this poor protagonist on this picture? Is it real or not? Is it his imagination or is it reality? What's being put into his skull? And by the way, our protagonist wakes up with a horrible headache. So is it that the feeling is really unsettling? The game is basically a horror game. So expect extreme levels of gigarism and bizarre machine constructs with alien-like visage. I mean, aliens like in the movie. So a very dark atmosphere. While we are at this hard to digest content, I need to remind you about that I have no mouth and I must scream once again, because everything about this game is weird. As it was about Harlan Ellison's short story, which this game is based on. Let me remind you that Harlan Ellison gives the voice to so the biggest and the only actually villain in this game, because the villain of this game is a supercomputer that was created by humankind, which in turn killed all humankind except 6 people. And because this AI hates humans' guts so much that this AI just made those 6 people immortal in some weird way, and that this AI just tortures them, infinitely tortures those protagonists. So the goal of the game is to escape the supercomputer's grasp somehow. It doesn't really matter how you escape. If you can escape by committing suicide, I mean the real suicide, this is still an escape. So it's perfectly desirable. by the player, which makes it very dark. And there are of course darker places and darker situations than that, like Ellen, which is that lady in the red, is presented. Every place she visits is yellow, and for some reason she has fear, and she yellow makes her sick, physically sick. So we learn later on that this is because of the rape, and this is like some extreme content there. So Am tortures her, reminding her all the time that she was raped, and she was raped by the guy who was dressed in yellow. So this is extremely sensitive content, and be warned that this game is really memorable in like a very great adventure game which gives you this feeling afterwards. So and Am uses all the tricks in the book to make those humans suffer. So there's a lot of bizarreness. And on this top right screenshot, you can see what happens to the protagonist when protagonist loses, when the player loses. Am hates people so much that he would turn them into the being that has no mouth and the being that at the same time wants to scream, and that's very very hard to imagine even. So thumbs up. Lovecraftian horror is weird by the very definition. So H.P. Lovecraft created his universe at the beginning of the 20th century. He was known as the solitary man of Providence, a loner of Providence, which makes the person behind all the mythology a weird guy, because he was a weird bookworm. He was extremely prejudiced person, but this can be actually explained. So actually, he was racist. He was racist, prejudiced. He was living in Providence, and he was like confined to his apartment. He had some kind of psychological, personal anxiety and social issues, which like added up to this feeling of prejudices that he had, and he was living in a really unhealthy atmosphere that he or his family created for him initially, and then he created it for himself. So his real universe, the universe he was operating in, was actually the universe of books and libraries only. So he would base his superstitions, knowledge of the world, on books, which in turn made his words and his literary talents extremely good. So knowing that this is a genesis of a writer, this shows you what's the genesis of the stories is, and the weirdness in those stories that comes from the fact that the writer was a little bit weird. And while we're there, I need to tell you that I'm wearing the Vampire the Masquerade t-shirt today. Vampire the Masquerade is also a Lovecraftian horror to some extent. That's because there are some beings there that are like in the Lovecraft works, godlike creatures, completely incomprehensible creatures that govern the world and actually bode ill for the world. So humankind in both stories is shunned, is not important, and the feeling of lack of being important, feeling of being a puppet, the feeling of being a tool, or not even a tool, because being a tool makes one feel important. But in Lovecraftian horror, humankind is not even a tool. It's just not important bug that can be squished by the powers that have that whim, and because of that, the feeling of mystery, the feeling of weirdness, incomprehensible creatures, incomprehensible knowledge that extends all beyond all the reality, beyond all the known world, is still and always there. So Shot with the Comet, Prisoner of Ice, Lovecraftian. This is also the French game again. This is Infogrames games. So imagine this French bizarreness of the game dev, and added Lovecraftian horror to it. It's really a great mix, and feels really weird. Everything, music, visuals. Like I probably mentioned this before, but take a look at the sunset there. This is like one of the most sinister sunsets in games I have ever seen. So the black sky, and there's just a glimpse of sunset somewhere. This is absolutely feeling of dread is complete. And of course, it's really hard to feel that while you're watching me now talking about this. But if you played this game, you knew exactly what I mean, and it would make you feel it. Um, Again, the same company, Infogrames, created one of the most iconic franchises of the 90s, which is Alone in the Dark. And this is also a Lovecraftian horror. Of course, very worthy mentioning is the fact that they wanted to be very inclusive for players, so they created ability to play either as male or female protagonists at the time. So today, someone could ask, where is the other representation? Where is the whole LGBTQ representation? Well, back at the time, uh, this type of inclusion was really something. So, like, I just wanted to show you that not so long ago the world was a little bit different than it is today, and it was different in a negative way. So this game is ugly according to Pinpinax, but according to me, it's not, because the 3D, early 3D is always ugly. It's really hard to distinguish. But I have a different eye, I must say, because the very first thing from the game dev perspective, because I'm sorry, I have a game dev perspective on this, is that this is 3D mixed with 2D, as you can see. The wardrobe in that room when in which Edward Carnby is standing in is 2D, while the Edward himself is 3D. The same, this is the scene below when Edward enters the room. Everything is 2D except Edward. So basically, yeah. I think the wardrobe is 3D. That's true. I'm mistaken there. The wardrobe is 3D probably, but some other elements are not. Like, I think that chair to the left or sofa is 2D. Definitely, the on the picture below, the picture represents the environments which are 2D, but Edward is not. And so this is early 3D. But bear in mind, back in the day, nobody used any tools to create 3D. So there were tools on Amiga, there were some 3D simple tools. But in those games, one would need to create a mesh of 3D vertices by code. And this is actually the hugest difference between the old game dev of the 80s and 90s and the game dev today. 3D game dev today always uses the 3D sculpting tools, always. Nobody ever nobody thinks, except for the people who want to have some extremely great physics in games, about creating vertices in code. So this was completely different. Those characters were completely created with coding. That's what I'm trying to say there. And it's quite an impressive feat, actually. The movements were really cool. The animations were great. So the animations of those 3D characters were made by specific algorithms placed in code, not the skeletal animations like today, but this was a skeletal animation, but not by a common custom engine, but by the developers, written by the developers themselves. So this is really awesome. And as a horror, this game is really awesome Lovecraftian horror, and then adventure game as well. So let me just take a sip of coffee and let's go forward. Again, the same companies, Lovecraftian horror again, Daughter of the Serpents. This is the same UI I've been talking about during the Cyberpunk Dragon game. So this game is really nice. It takes place in Egypt, during which a protagonist wants to find initially a murderer, but it turns out to be a big Lovecraftian plot with, of course, those alien Lovecraftian bizarre creatures. In this game, these are snake men, and the most important thing, I think, one of the most bizarre moments of this game, the weird feelings, was a night at the museum in Cairo, in which actually there is a being, one of those elder gods from Lovecraftian universe called Nyarlathotep. And Nyarlathotep is especially nasty one because Nyarlathotep has interest in humans, and very ill and bad interest. Nyarlathotep likes to play by showing himself to humans in various forms and teaching humans some really nasty things. So if somebody was to give nuclear missiles to humankind, it would be Nyarlathotep, because it would be fun for him. I mean, I don't know that because this being is so bizarre, so incomprehensible that there's no explanation about Nyarlathotep's motivation. What we just know is the fact that Nyarlathotep is involved, and during the night in the museum, it spawns itself as a black pharaoh with red gemly eyes before the player, and gives a player a secret, shares a secret with the player, wanting nothing in return, which makes it highly suspicious, right? But this is Nyarlathotep. You don't know if the hint you were given by the elder god is a good hint or bad thing, whether it leads to something really disastrous. So again, Lovecraftian horror is always bizarre. I mentioned during the stream about adventure games about Mistlikes. These are games in which you are placed in some weird environments, and everything you do is basically about exploration and discovering how this world works and how bizarre it is, and trying to solve some puzzles and so on. But what really stands out is actually Zork Nemesis in my eyes. That's because the environments in which player is or visits are so suggestive. Again, it's one of those places and environments in games in which you want to explore everything, learn about who built that thing, why this temple was even created, who would use this architecture, why this architecture is made like that, who practiced magic and what this magic was for, because this is not initially like certain why and what for. So the more you learn about the game, the more you find objects which are really weird, like this mood head on the plate there, moody psychotic character's head. It really gets more weird and more bizarre than that, especially while trying to figure out what the protagonists, or what that titular nemesis is, why this nemesis thing is trying to stop the protagonist from continuing, or who was this violinist girl that appears on pictures and places player visits. So the story is really interesting, but the world is absolutely bizarre and uh, really unlike everything that I experienced in many other games. But mislikes are all like that. All games from that genre are very similar. So it's like with the anime genre of isekai, in which or manga, in which protagonist is being placed in another world and has to explore this world. So this is like in the isekai, that you need to explore in mislikes, understand what the world is and why it is like that to actually be able to complete the game. Again, Ecstatica. Uh, Early 3D is awful, but this game is probably one of the best 3D horrors ever made. Ellipsoid, especially very neatly introducing evil characters. The fear is real in this game. Whenever you're playing this game, everything is like lurks behind the corner, and because the premises of the game are really evil, so this is like an evil, satanistic, demonic possession of the place. Everything is really horrible, so there are crucified people around. The village is really, really decimated, and killed people around lying, and so the feeling is bizarre and weird in the meaning that this is uh, um, like a really good presented horror, and in which you would probably expect a lot of gore, but not in the way it's being presented to you. So this is like a really using gore and brutality with really cool method in the developer's mind. So this is really conveyed very well. I hinted this one on the group. So the Primal Rage was basically created in the era of Mortal Kombat, like beat 'em ups. This game was actually interesting because it was the commercials of Primal Rage were played on MTV, music television, back in the 90s, early 90s. So I remember this commercial because this was in this commercial there's a screaming child with horror, and then there was like a dinosaur appearing shouting rage or something. So really, really cheesy. Uh, so as a fighting game, it wasn't so good. What was addition? So back in the day, everybody wanted more blood. At least developers thought, and publishers thought that everybody wanted more blood in those Mortal Kombat-like games. So they introduced dinosaurs because um, the Jurassic Park was the thing at the time. They introduced a lot of blood because our dinosaurs could eat up a human. As you can see, they're like cultist humans on one of those screenshots there, to regain some health. And there was, of course, like fighting between those. And so what's bizarre? Bizarre is the fact that when you're fighting or playing a fighting game, those fighting games are basically created to have human mechanics in mind. So you know that humans fight in a very, very specific way. So we're using legs, fists, and so on. But here you have dinosaurs, so it wasn't really immediately understandable for a player to how to play the Vertigo or Talon or this weird Tyrannosaurus Rex that was called by some Tolkien fan Sauron. Um, those creatures behaved in a way that was not quite expected by a player initially, and one needed to learn the moves and how those creatures behave to actually start playing this. So it wasn't like with Mortal Kombat when you just sat down and you knew that this is high punch and low punch and high kick and low kick. This was different, and yeah, he used tail. So how T-Rex could have fist fight? No, he wouldn't use fist. He would use tails and jaws, and he would jump very highly jump. So there were two like monkey-like creatures, like this blizzard. This blizzard was actually an ice monkey. I'm. This is weird, isn't it? So yeah, very interesting game. I remember that it was published when I was in the first year of my high school, so it was like everybody was talking about it back then, and it's like 25 years or something ago. Some more mislikes. So Shivers. This is just a example of that setting is weird because this Shivers is the game that's being placed. I mentioned this before in a museum in which a bunch of teenagers locks a protagonist down in as a weird teenage way of proving their courage. So exploring this museum is interesting. There's a lot of cool educational even content in this game, but the museum itself feels really weird. It's really bizarre because I don't know anyone who would create a museum like that would contain things that are horror-like, and this is like one of those museums of bizarre things, so those curiosity places, and this is actually this what this game is. Strongly recommend playing this. Absolutely weird mechanics as well. As you can see, I mentioned this before, but this game is about capturing evil spirits into the vessels. So the mechanics is you need to find a specific lid, specific vessel, and capture a specific creature into that lid and vessel. So there's a lot backtracking, moving around to find those spirits. And because those spirits tend to hide in the elements that they represent. So the spirit of metal will be in some metal object, and you need to capture it before it actually harms you, because those you can die in this game basically. Bizarre museum. That's weirdness of this game. The mislikes worth mentioning is the RIA, one of those Polish games of the 90s. Again, I will not explain you why the RIA is different or bizarre there. What I can tell you about, because this is yet another mislike, but what stayed with me after this game is this feeling of the weird desert city. So there's a city placed in the middle of the desert, and this city has an interesting architecture, a temple inside, and everything. And no one builds cities like this one. Never, ever. Even in reality, desert cities don't look like this one. This is like a fantasy desert city with somebody with this is like high fantasy something, and the impression is really really bizarre, and that's why this game is on this list today. Okay, AD 2044 sounds really similar to another Polish game that's going to be released this year, which has 77 in its name, and I don't think it's a coincidence. Because AD 2044 is a game that's based on the movie known in Poland very well, which is called Sex Misja, Sex Mission in English, which apparently everybody has a problem when we have our foreign friends invited over, for example, and if we're asked to like hit us with some fun Polish movie or something, and if people would pick Sex Misia, which for Polish people is extremely hilarious. Everybody knows citations for quotes from this movie. Everybody still laughs at the situations. It for some reason it's not completely not funny for everybody that's not Polish, and I can understand why, because at the very first glimpse, there's so many meta information there that's known for Poles that it's really hard to grasp for anybody else. That we laugh not at the uh, quotes that are being said, but we laugh on the meta information that is on this between those lines, so to speak. So it's really hard to explain, but. There is a lot of stuff uh, that makes us laugh and nobody else. So any other people that are looking into this movie consider this like a cool science fiction, because the movie is about uh, two men being frozen and unfrozen after some time after the post-apocalyptic nuclear war to find out that the world is inhabited only by women. So, as sexist as it sounds, it's not really that, because those two men are actually a curiosity because of this new environment and new world. And of course, the comedy comes from the fact that there's like uh, the new denizens of the world don't really know how to treat those males, and the fact that the whole movie premise is a pastiche on communism, really, not the sex or sexist stuff, but this is actually like the two males represent the democratic, open way of thinking, while the uh, regime is being like representing the communist regime. But then they created a game out of it, and this game is AD 2044, and the game doesn't have these comical elements in it at all. So this is only purely the science fiction experience, but worth knowing that this bizarre world of one gender, because like it's not really one gender, because like we have that dysfunction there, the disruption there, which is our two males or the male protagonist in this game. So the connection or interactions of our protagonists with the denizens of the world are really bizarre, and trying to explain the officers things, or trying to hide us, or trying like to dress as a woman to be able to hide the true identity. There's like this feeling of weirdness, because this is what the situation makes player feel actually. So while we're at in the gender situations, and while we're speaking about gender, there's this weird game called Gender Wars, which is actually yes, nothing. That's something that nobody would even try to do today, and it's I think it's good because the subject is really weird. Like why would men fight women or other way around? This is so 90s. This that somebody created a tactics game in which both sides are just genders. So I couldn't play this game really because I felt at the time that it's so silly, that I would need to combat like the other gender, especially when it was released at the time when I was a teenager, actually looking into the other gender with very big curiosity and increasing curiosity. So that felt really weird, and I basically, if it felt weird in 1995, it definitely feels weird in 2020. So, but worth mentioning that there was the game like this one. Back to the French games. Goblins, created by Cocktail Vision. Hello, you lost the sound, and that's probably my fault. Yep, that's because I know why. Th- that's because this equipment that I have is actually working basically on the fact that something plays in the background, and the fact is that everything stopped playing, so my equipment just turned off. So, when did you lost me? Did you lost me on the gender wars or on the goblins, or when? Let me know in the. Okay. So let me just quickly repeat that this is like a goblins premise, weird game about mm, weird cartoonish characters with weird culture, weird architecture, and weird settings. Also, the mechanics is different. The mechanics is very weird. So this is an adventure game with item usages, but not only, also a lot of interactivity with the environments. It's like when you look at this game, nothing clicks together. So, but then you, after some time, when you got accustomed to it and if you got used to it, you start to understand the premises and you start to understand the setting. But before that, everything is absolutely bizarre. The same company created this one of the saddest video games of the video game era, which is the Woodruff and the Schneeball of Azimuth. The same weirdness, the same weird protagonists, and a very bizarre setting as well. Absolutely worth playing, but let me tell you that this doesn't end well. This is a very, very sad story. But worth playing nonetheless. Okay. Again, back to the times when everybody wanted more blood and more shocking. So this is not really weird. This is more shocking than weird. But there were two games. One called Street Hustle, in which the weird uh, wrestler fought with elderly people. Yeah, that's self-explanatory why it's weird. And the another Polish production, which is Franco the Crazy Revenge. The setting of this game was that Franco and Alex. Yes, Franco and Alex in Szczecin. They were being assaulted by some street punks, and one of those guys dies. So the other is a selectable character, and he gets back to this transition period, Polish period looking block district. So the transition period meaning between communism times and post-communism. So really obscure place. and wants to have revenge. So the combatants are really weird people, like karate trainers, police, every potential um, combatant I could imagine coming from that period. Like the premises was just the setting. So this is the setting of the game that is post like uh, transition period Poland and vengeance and everything, and this makes it really weird cocktail. Mentioned before that the Bad Mojo, so the cockroach game. Again, this experience has not been doubled by anything yet. I have never seen a game that has been doing the same thing after this one. So, being a cockroach, this is a game about being a cockroach. So, what can one add to it? Everything is now, the perspective is now shifted, and world that you know as a human looks very different from the cockroach perspective. Uh, the oil stain that was left by you after frying something uh, um, with your frying pan that you forgot to clean up because you're doing something for a cockroach, it it's a unpassable obstacle. And this is the shift of perspective, the looking at the world via the cockroach's eyes is unforgettable and really, really worth experiencing. And it really finds its place on this list today because it definitely is a bizarre game about weirdness. Before you end up being a cockroach, the protagonist is also a weird guy, and this human weirdness that he has before being turned into a cockroach is, of course, a part of the story. So weirdness is embedded in this one. One more screenshot there to show you that this world, the nasty world created by humans, really untidy humans, is a labyrinth for this said cockroach. So this shifts the perspective. Well, everyone knows the Neverhood, right? Everyone knows this clay game about clay people with clay storyline. Again, the storyline was based on the Bible, really, as the developer said. So it's about creation and turning into evil, evil for the selfish reasons. But whoever played this game, everybody knows that this game is really, really bizarre. I mean, the clay settings, that everything's from clay creatures, and even protagonists. Not only Clayman, which is our protagonist, but also Willy Trombone, who can be seen there trying to eat the tentacle of the monster. Really interesting background stories and really interesting background characters, and always memorable because they're so different from the what we expect them to be, and that's what's the setting of this game. Also mentioned before was the Little Big Adventure 1 and 2. Another French game about a weird planet of Twin Sun, which has a ice equator and hot places on its poles because it has two suns, so the planet is between two suns, and that's why it's like that. So it's like a fairy tale setting with really weird NPCs. So just look at the screenshots there. We have weird elephants, bug like people. So everything ties together really neatly into a very interesting fairy tale and really soothing experience. This is one of the games that if you have a bad day or a bad period in your life, it probably will give you some solace, because this is like, even though there are some bad happenings in this game, uh, the fairy tale setting and the positiveness it brings with it is really, really something. Toonstruck is what can I say? If you have seen the Who Framed Roger Rabbit movie, then you know what kind of weirdness I'm talking about here. So this is like cartoon characters having interaction with a human. So you always looking if that kind of with some disbelief if that interaction is really happening or what's that interaction all about. Trying to find, you're trying like subconsciously trying to find a mistake or some something that would tell your brain that this is not really happening, but it is happening because this is the premise of the game. So the feeling is kind of uh, artificial all the time, which makes this game perfect for today's list, I guess. Of course, characters are really wacky because those cartoons that it was inspired by are really wacky. So you can expect 10-ton weights falling on protagonist's head almost every time there. So this is really weird, loony. Well, why this game is on the list? Somebody could argue, why Wing Commander? Why this space simulation? It's weird. It's not weird. It's just a science fiction with really cool protagonists and fighting against cat people, Kilrathi. Yeah, it's not only Wing Commander, by the way. It's also Privateer. There's like two franchises in the same universe. Wing Commander focusing on the war with Kilrathi from the soldier's perspective, and Privateer focusing on the space trader in the same universe. But the Kilrathi were defeated, but they are still on the brink of the sector. So why bizarre? Because this was an approach to space opera, a space fantasy, unlike any other that you could see before. Of course, everybody knew about Star Wars and seen Star Wars before, but this is different. This is like there's of course this hint of like being a pilot, like an X-wing pilot there, but Wing Commander comes with its own premise, with its own universe, its own aliens, and wraps it up in the real warlike theme. So it more feels like a Second World War pilot ace than a fantasy or science fiction pilot ace. And this makes it really interesting. Also, there is this interaction between the protagonist and other pilots, wingmen. There are happenings in the world. So it was unseen at the time, and for years unchallenged by any other space opera simulation game. So when it was released, everybody was amazed and considered this game unlike any other, which like earns that's why it earns its place on this list. But there's not only one game about space, faring, and travel and trading, right? As far as I'm concerned, this was the first one. So Elite was the first, not only the first space travel game or space faring and combat, but it was the first 3D game ever made, done by two students of Cambridge University at the time. Cambridge rather than Oxford, I think. David Braben and Ian Bell. on the 8-bit BBC microcomputer, which they made because nobody told them that, because the business already knew that there's no possibility of creating the 3D game representation in games, but they didn't know about that, so they created a 3D game. And actually, this is a game about playing and trading and fighting and landing on places. With later developments like Frontier from the 1993, you could land on planets, atmospheric planets even. Those planets had an insane amount of details. It's all ugly 3D now, but those planets were detailed to the tiniest factories and buildings. So this is something that's unprecedented, and for a long time it was not repeated in games. Even today, as you can see, there is a screenshot from Elite Dangerous in the middle. So Elite Dangerous was released in 2014, and it still doesn't have the planetary cities. It has planetary bases and non-atmospheric planets, but not to that detail. Then it has cities and so on. Everybody was joking at the time that Braben and Bell sold their souls to the devil to get the way, because this game was, the whole game was on a one low density floppy disk. So this is a 720 kilobytes. Yeah, that's small. And there is a whole galaxy in it. So this is absolutely insane. And Braben was given a computer science professor title when he was 26 or 27, which tells a lot. Probably everybody remembers Abe's Odyssey and the weirdness of the setting when Mudokon's trying to escape the concentration camp, in which they're being turned into food for the evil race that enslaves them. What's different there from the norm is that the premise, the world is interesting. So it looks like a post-apo, heavily industrialized, and of course the protagonist species and the species of the oppressors, like the squid-like creatures and our Mudokons, which have their mouth tied by some weird organs, like somebody sew their faces. So maybe it was actually happening. I'm not sure. I don't remember it that well. But really off world, odd world, odd. This is the word here. The word here, even in the name. This is really an odd world. So another odd feeling that was in games was in MDK. Actually, when this game was advertised, the advertisements included trying to unravel what MDK really means. And the commercials would say weird explanations what MDK stands for. Actually, if I remember correctly, it stands for murder, death, kill. And one would say that, whoa, is it a game about bloody, so bloody, is that's about murdering, death and killing? Basically, yes, but in really light-hearted way. So aliens and machine-like aliens attack the Earth, and there's a number of protagonists. So in the first game, it's only Kurt, which has this combat suit created by the professor for him that jumps from the jumps from the orbital station to reach the Earth atmosphere, to reach the great cities operated by aliens, like moving cities that trample everything on its way, on their way. So Kurt fights aliens to stop those constructs and to destroy those constructs. In the second game, also, which featured also Max, the four-legged, four-armed evolved dog with a cigar. Uh, it's a science fiction with a really fun gameplay at the time, really, really, absolutely interesting. But you could not but feel that there is some comedy in it, and there was this really lighthearted, and there is some comedic relief there when you see the big bug boss that waves to you in some robotic way. So it kind of felt odd, really odd. In the time of first person shooters, there were many of those. I don't want to get through all those, but the blood really is worthy of mentioning because everything in this game felt odd. Like fighting zombies with pitchforks and finding dozens of mimes on your way defines this game so well, and our character is a really weird person. So, and the storyline and everything around this game is really, really, really odd. Again, this word really describes it. Uh, Level building, creatures, monsters. Really, what a ride it was. So I mentioned Jeunet as a French director who creates weird movies. So Jean-Pierre Jeunet and Marc Caro, they created several movies that are really, really bizarre. And Amélie is probably the most known one about the girl and her positiveness. But there are others like Delicatessen about post-apo block in which the like cannibalism happens, and of course the City of the Lost Children, which it's really hard to explain. Just watch the movie. And of course, because the movie is so weird and so fairy tale like, detached from reality, with completely weird comic book like characters, the game is like based on the movie, so it's equally weird. Okay, potentially sensitive subject, but let me just ensure that I'll talk about this in positive way, with all but positiveness in inclusiveness in my mind. So, as I mentioned before, the 90s was still a transition period when situations like LGBTQ problems or LGBTQ issues was still being combated. I'm not sure if like the fight is like ceased. I mean there's still a way to go to actually include everybody that deserves inclusion. So, but before, like 25 years ago or 30 years ago, it was still very unlikely for the gay person to be depicted in the movies or TV series or especially video games, which were apparently were for kids. So those are moral guardians, bigots, were always trying to defend children from Mortal Kombat, blood, and LGBTQ people in their minds as well. So I remember trivia. I remember then when there was a TV series called The Dynasty. I'm not sure if you remember from the 80s, and I think that this TV series made so big work for LGBTQ people in Poland because it was the very first TV series in Poland that featured a gay character, and everybody kind of shifted mentally that okay, so there's a gay character. Everybody got used to that fact that there was a gay character, and that's normal. Everybody, so the gay people are okay, right? So, in the games that there was a nobody like remembers this, and maybe it's a little bit obscured, but there was a very similar process in the games and the game recipients as well. So remember that games are, especially in the 80s and the 90s, games are for kids. Nobody thinks about games, video games, about like medium for adults. No, it was for kids. So, but of course, adults started playing, and we, which especially teenagers at the time, were to be adults soon after, and not much time had to pass to become adults. So people started, game dev industry started feeling that this is the time to actually introduce the more inclusiveness in games and more content, like teaching the recipients about LGBT issues. So I think one of the very first representations, in this case terms bisexual character, was introduced in games quite late, because it was 1992 or 94, I don't remember now, but it was Japanese games, Darkstalkers. Darkstalkers, it reminded me about Darkstalkers because there is a show on Netflix called High Score Girl. If you're a video game fan from the 90s, then you have to see that one, because this is just a sentimental ride. I absolutely love it, and it's 10 out of 10. And Darkstalkers is very featured in High Score Girl anime. So it reminded me, and I think like the fact that High Score Girl, I watched it several months ago. It reminded me about this game when I was creating this presentation, because Morrigan, I think, is the first bisexual characters when developers actually told the audience that, yeah, Morrigan is, but like, yeah, we have a multitude of characters, and by the way, Morrigan is bi. And it was, of course, it was controversy at the time. Everybody was, whoa, how can you introduce bisexual characters? But since it was Japan first, so the Japan audience wasn't that combative about the like the Western audience. But then it's really important to know that that there is a place in which that happened, that change started to happening, and this is in the Japanese game. Obviously, like Japanese game dev industry was far more open-minded. By the way, there is another Japanese game that features an LGBTQ character, which is Mario. In Mario, there's one pinkish dinosaur at the time, but nobody explained at the time that this character is about representation or inclusiveness. They just left it in the game for the people who could discover it by themselves or on their own paces, or suspect this character to be LGBT. I know that they confirmed it after many decades. So, but then let's say that Darkstalkers is one of the first that actually does that. By the way, gender issues, like the Rex Nebula and the Cosmic Gender Bender, the title itself, it's really like I cannot even explain how bad the title is in today's terms. But at the time, yeah, this cat is also weird. I agree. But at the time, imagine the situation in which if you try to introduce the gender switching or gender or transgender content into the games, you need to place this game in space because nobody would accept it on Earth, and it needs to be funny. So they made a comedy out of it, and this is like the lowest of the low possible comedy. So it's funny because a guy turns into a lady. Yeah, not funny at all. But I just wanted to show you that this transition period, as well as in books, as well as in TV series or movies, it also happened in video games. So making this weird into a norm, and like accustoming everybody with the fact that this is normal, and shifting to from the weirdness to the normality. But there was this. This is not a particularly good adventure game, but worth knowing that there was this experiment about cosmic gender bender, and worth knowing that there was something like that. But this is actually the biggest milestone when it comes to LGBTQ content in games. Uh, Phantasmagoria 2 is the very first game that featured the very first male gay kiss. I think that it was completely the first gay in general kiss scene in games between Trevor and our protagonist Curtis. Curtis is a bisexual that works in a weird triangle, and then he has lives in a weird triangle, and then he has some other sexual intercourses with some other protagonists. It's really complex. But also, not only that, also the first queer transdresser or transdresser, it's really hard to tell, in games, which of course again was introduced in some with some comedy relief, so not with all seriousness it deserves, but in a very clever way, in which it made the player, if the player was straight or something, feel awkward, not because the character introduced was awkward or weird, but because player felt that they should act in some other way. And that was happening to me definitely. I was like a teenager back then, raised in this different culture of 90s. So in this scene, when Curtis meets that person, that transdresser person, that transdresser person like wants to have a good time with Curtis, right? And Curtis says no, and Curtis is really awkward at the moment, and just leaves. And that transdresser person just looks at Curtis with this really mild look and says, "Amateurs." And this was like a brilliant shift from making that character, that transdresser character, weird, into making a player weird, or a Curtis weird, for not acting as a normal person should act, which is actually being acceptive and not awkward. And this is actually the very first game that did that. And then the plot of the Phantasmagoria 2 is fishy. It might be bad, could be better. Phantasmagoria 1 is so much better when it comes to the horror plot and horror element. But this game is definitely worth mentioning, that is the very first game that this LGBT work there about inclusiveness in video games. Not only that, but Gabriel Knight, the best within, Baron Friedrich von Glover, is told by the game to be a partner of Ludwig II of Bavaria, the guy who built up the Neuschwanstein castle. And so the part of the game happens in the Neuschwanstein and in the Munich area. So there is also some chemistry going on between von Glover and Gabriel in that game. So as you can see, the boldness of some games started introducing more and more content that several years ago, like 5 years ago, would be considered weird, but right now, at this stage, it's becoming a norm, and that transition is there. So the weird towards normal. So enough about gender and LGBTQ issues. I mentioned about Sanitarium before, and the Sanitarium weirdness it cannot be explained without spoiling a story, because then we have a weirdness in the storyline right now, people. So this is no longer setting that is being weird. This is a storyline weirdness. So without spoiling. This is a game about mental issues. So mental issues and mental illnesses include things like schizophrenia and memory loss issues and anxiety with coming with amnesia and so on. So, and putting the player in shoes of a protagonist who's affected by those illnesses makes the perception of the world really odd and weird and scary at many places. And soon after you learn that scary doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that the world is horrific. It sometimes means that something's happening to your brain on the world, or the world perceived by the protagonist is horrific. And many places it's weird. There are some characters that are really odd. Like there's a patient of the mental asylum who dresses in a ballerina's tutu, so this little round dress, and there's a lot, and this means something in game. It's not random. It's not just being there for the sake of being random bizarreness. No, no, no. It has a meaning. So Sanitarium thumbs up for being a weird game as well. I also mentioned the Dreamweb and this controversy about Dreamweb and shooting people in game during the sexual intercourse. But again, this is also like a Sanitarium game about mental issues and mental problems, and our protagonist is, without spoiling, it's really hard without spoiling, but it's really hard to say if he's delusional or prophetic. Again, that's the problem. And again, the same problem as in the Sanitarium, that the perception of the world is bizarre because it's filtered by the mental issues. Blood Omen Legacy of Kain was the first game that started the Soul River series and Blood Omen series. Amy Hennig's storytelling masterpieces. This world and this work features a world of Nosgoth. And it's kind of partially Lovecraftian horror because there is, of course, a malicious force behind all this. So if there is a Lovecraftian element to it, then it's partly bizarre because of that, but also because of the premises and the objects like the pillars of Nosgoth. So the infinitely extended pillars, as you can see on the screenshot there, that go to the skies, that defend this world from weird influences. The absolutely bizarre protagonists and creatures that delve in this world. Vampires, because this is vampiric content and vampiric world, and all the story like goes around in circles about vampires and vampiric issues, is not immediately recognizable by any vampiric content fan. So these are weird vampires. As Marta says, this is not only some really cool time traveling issues. This is probably the franchise of Blood Omen and Legacy of Kain is Soul River are probably the best time traveling experiences. Apart from this, I'm being told that Octo Traveler is also one of those. But I haven't played Octo Traveler, but this one I had. And one need a notebook and a pen to understand how time and how time paradoxes work in Legacy of Kain and Soul River series. But I will not delve into the Soul River because this is a 2000 game, so 2002 is Soul River release. But Blood Omen is a 90s game, so it's worth knowing that this insanity, this madness of Legacy of Kain, of the time traveling paradoxes, Sarafan strongholds, soul vampires, Hilden demons, and everything revolving around this world started in 90s in this game, in Blood Omen Legacy of Kain. Okay, this is an adventure game. Just look for a moment. Harry Potter plus sex. Yes, that's exactly that. And so weirdness, not really weird, just a idea of creating a storyline about a wizard adept from the wizard school that goes picking up girls on the beach side when those normally this is an activity reserved for muscular beach denizens or dwellers or vacation people, but this is wizards doing that stuff, and this collision between worlds make it really uh, odd. Um, yeah, very good idea. Very good reminder. Pimpix says that this reminds of the necromancer motivations in Pratchett books. Yeah, not really necromancers motivations, but why necromancers wear rings with skulls on their fingers. Because rings with skulls are extremely cool and they're magnet on babes, as the necromancer says in the Pratchett books. But this is exactly what it is. I mentioned Cosmology of Kyoto. Still haven't played that. I need to get my hands on it. Again, remember that this is by the director Guillermo del Toro, marked as a very important influence and one of the most important games in his life. This is again reminding about Legacy of Kain creator Amy Hennig when she said that the new games should be like the Netflix, so they should include everybody, created directed content for everyone on demand, and that content should have educational value, be interactive, film like, and have a distinctive feeling that this is not a movie, that this is something else. And this game, Cosmology of Kyoto, is apparently this. I've seen it only on YouTube, and I've seen how the other people are playing this game. So this is definitely something else. It has its own glossary, vocabulary, its own Bible of content, explanations of how Japan worked in the Heian period, so the early medieval Japan. Japan without samurai yet. Samurai were about to happen in 200 years. So that's what this game is. Also, I mentioned Albion and as a top RPG, and what I wanted to remind you is the fact that this is a different world, so different planet with different species and different characters and different cultures and nations, and the whole feeling of bizarre again comes from the fact that you need to explore those cultures, languages, behaviors. Those are different species, so their mating rituals, the way they raise their young, everything is different from humans. And as we humans, when we learn something new or see something new, we either fear it or we think that's bizarre or weird. So there is a weirdness in Albion. And of course, immense ability to explore this magnificent world. Of course, this comes from the German developer Blue Byte. Weirdness in the storyline features also Callahan's Cross-Time Saloon. Again, this is something on my list. I again seen some footages of this and explanations and essays, video essays on this game. So the setting is very easy. There's a nexus of times and spaces in which all kinds of individuals go into to meet up and discuss things, and this is Callahan's Cross-Time Saloon. So just imagine a saloon in which you can meet up various aliens, characters from every timelines, and this is an adventure game in this silly, weird premise. Okay, so Superhero League of Hoboken again still need to play that. This engine player that plays as a superhero agency that's the worst superhero agency ever and needs to rise up in the ranks. So this is just you create a bunch of superheroes. You can see those on the screenshot. They're really weird individuals. Employ that and then you try to level those up. They have really weird superpowers. I mean, really weird superpowers, and those battles with weird plants, like you can see somebody fights plants, and the battle there. Suggester says that something about uh, like the battle on the screenshot is about being convinced by suggester. This is not a physical combat. This is weird combat. And then you have weird superpowers, and this is an RPG adventure blend, very hilarious and made to be funny, but yet quite eye-opening and mind-opening. Weirdness consists also from the weird, cheesy games, gory games, and disgusting and silly games, and Harvester is definitely every of those. Uh, Please, just look at this screenshot. There's a girl lying on the bed saying "make love to me," and there's a guy looking like a farmer looking at her. Apparently, he just entered the room. Yes, it is cheesy. It is extremely gory, and it's still extremely stupid at times. That's why it earned its place on this weirdness in storyline list. Yes, yes. So there's like perspective problems because he's a boy actually, but a teenager really, or young adult more like I think. We reached one of the gems now on my list, and then the gem is Tex Murphy Adventure Games. So Tex Murphy series started with Mean Streets and Martian Memorandum, and then went through FMV era under the Killing Moon, Pandora's Directive, Tesla Effect, and so on. Tex, why this game is on the weird list? Because this is a post-apo with so interesting and odd characters that listing all those characters and why they're interesting would be very hard work. But there's a lot of mutants with weird mutations there, so there's like physical oddness. And our protagonist is a Chandler-esque noir detective in a post-apo science fiction world with space travel. Yes, and not only that, he often wears white sneaker shoes to this trench coat and hat apparel that he has. This is a comedy game. Not only the noir game, which it is, and extremely interesting and smart detective game, but it's also quite cheesy. He has a lot of personal problems. He's absolutely he's a failure as a detective, really. Not really, because he's actually quite becoming quite good at it, but he makes so many mistakes, so many hilarious silly moments are in these games, and also a lot of memorable characters. So Chelsea Bando, the newspaper seller, or other. There is a clown office on the street across the street from the building Tex lives in, and the clown sells strange masks. So expect a lot of weirdness. Uh, expect a lot of absolutely bizarre moments in this game. And I absolutely love the story and I love the storytelling and I love the smart detective situations. But this is a one of a kind game. Like some characters from the games, you can see the mutant diner owner, masks being sold by our creepy clown, and Chelsea selling newspapers. So this absolutely great game. I would bet that I'm probably the only person today that remembers Corporation. This was a first-person perspective game that was made 2 years before the very first-person game, which is Wolfenstein, and that which makes Wolfenstein really not the first-person game, right? Not only that, it was an RPG that was kind of like Deus Ex. So you had a lot of items, stats, and it was about infiltrating the corporation filled with monsters and evil experiments and robots and so on. Um, so, as a every title that's the very first in some genres, this is like weirdness and mechanics. I will quickly went to chapter 3, which is weirdness and mechanics. So the mechanics of this one, where this was the first game of a kind, so this is the why it's weirdness of it can be denied, and that's why it's on that list. Really interesting mechanic in this game was, and of course weird at the time, that you needed to avoid cameras to spot you while crawling through those levels there. Okay, but there is some music in the background, but for this game I need to go and play once again the music from that game. So yeah, I just switched. So Rings of Medusa, this is a German game that was made and for the very first time it was made for multiple markets. So it was translated into English, but all the next games in a row, like Rings of Medusa Gold, were only on the German market and for the German market. So from the players who played Rings of Medusa, not many know that there were continuations. Well, let me tell you about this. This is a strategy game with commerce in it, real time, because everything really happens in real time. So days pass, you really can pause the game, but when you pause the game, you can't do nothing. So enemy armies move in real time. They build up in real time, assault your holdings in real time, and then you play. The protagonist is a last survivor of a royal family that was conquered by the evil Medusa, and it's all about finding 5 rings and using those 5 rings to destroy that evil goddess. And those rings can be carried by enemy armies, can be in the cities, can be hidden underground. So you need to create mines and so on. So mechanics of this game, there was so many things on so many levels in this game. So city governing when you acquire the city, fleet governance when you acquire a fleet, like you can see the screenshot there when you set up the fleet to actually the military vessels and trade vessels. You can see the trading screen on the bottom left. And those 2 screenshots there below that look kind of differently and nicer are from the Medusa Gold version. So there's a city screen general and a screen of dwarf soldier info. When you can, in this game, you not only needed to employ various races of combatants, but also equip those combatants in weapons and so on. So I thought that I had more screenshots with that, but I didn't, definitely. So this game had no successors, not at all, and I wish somebody would make a remake of it, because for some reason I love that game, and I played it several years ago for the last time. Really, I tend to return to that game from time to time, especially to the first game. so really bizarre because one of a kind. I told you that I will not mention the 8-bit era, but I need to mention at least three games from the 8-bit era. Spy versus Spy, because this was the first PvP game when you had like a competition really between two spies, and because this was based on some comic book that made the protagonist look really weird with like, really long noses, it stayed in my mind as a bizarre game of bizarre spies. Also, C'est la Vie was a game about life, really. So the precursor of the Sims game. So that if that's a game about life, gathering money, paying for your hospital bills, and things like that, that made it one of a kind back in the day, and therefore weird. And also Nightlore, because of the mechanics introduced the isometric view, and isometric view was something unseen before, and Diablo wouldn't exist without the Nightlore. So at the time, everybody was amazed by it, and it was odd because of that. Okay, I have several screenshots about Rings of Medusa, but later on. Sorry about that. So somehow I needed I moved them in a row by mistake. So these are again screenshots from Rings of Medusa. Getting back to the game, there is an overland map. There is a like, as you can see, there are three pictures I tried to show you of the same area. So the one to the left top is from PC, the one to the right is from Medusa Gold, and the one to the bottom is from Amiga. And in my eyes, Amiga wins. So the color designs, the color palette, everything was better on Amiga, in my opinion. So and the mine screen, of course, and the sea battle screen. So there was a lot of stuff. And again, more Rings of Medusa. So I thought that good that I put more screenshots. Army recruitment screen. Weaponsmith screen and battle screen when you actually send your combatants to fight. So real time, everything was real time, even battles. So those dragon riders would clash together, and at the time, absolutely unheard of. So there you have it, Rings of Medusa. From other weird strategic games that are mix of genres, and that's therefore weird. There was a North and South. This is another French game from Infogrames that featured, of course, loosely based. It was loosely based on this TV series North and South about secession war in the USA, so Civil War, and it featured real-time battles, very fun battles actually. Everybody who played remembers how it is cool to fight the whole enemy army with one cavalry man left. As you can see to the right, the screenshot to the right, you have one cavalryman charging before the stone. Other cavalryman is dying, I think, there next to that stone, and somebody operates the cannon as well. So, but not only the strategy element of this, also the arcade element when you assaulted trains or enemy forts, etc. Again, this was a music motif was really funny. There was a lot funny elements in that game. Again, this is the age of games of genre blends that never happened again, and that makes it bizarre from today's perspective. But not only this, Sid Meier, the author of Civilization, which of course is also a weird game by its own scale, was a Pirates. Another Sid Meier's Pirates was another multi-genre. As you can see, I introduced the screenshots from the very first versions of the Amiga games and Commodore version looked very similar but worse. And of course a remake that is available on Steam as well, I think, these days. So actually, the same fencing scene is seen the old version and the new there on the slide. So again, something unprecedented and something that never happened again. No more multi-genre games like this one happen. So these days it's either strategy game or arcade game, and nobody thinks about putting arcade into the strategy element. But it was so fun because those arcade moments were so like relieving, created mood and this feeling of immersion and impersonation. This was really great. I think that I also mentioned this cross-genre mix of Dungeons and Dragons and strategy game, also real-time. That featured also passing seasons and randomly generated world, and the fun thing that you created not a party of characters but party of rulers with their stats. So really fun game. Maybe it might be challenging for some, a little bit boring at times, maybe, because like the strategy element can be repetitive after some time. But nonetheless, the presentation again something that I haven't seen in games after. I know that there are some similar things, like Age of Wonders or something, but this is not quite like it. This is different. Um, and of course, at the time, the God games started. So Populous Peter Molyneux created this very first God game, which is the Populous, in which you were a god and had your uh, faithful worshippers that gave you power by praying, and you could use your godly powers to combat other gods, and this was basically a real-time strategy. So the very first of a kind. So actually, this also makes it weird and odd. Uh, the very same company and also Peter Molyneux created this cyberpunk RTS called Syndicate. So Syndicate allowed you, like in the Cannon Fodder, use your platoon to acquire new recruits. You could modify your recruits to become cyborgs that would help evolve your crime cyberpunk syndicate. Isometric strategy, real-time strategy with shooting. Again, at the time when it was released, there was nothing like it, and actually today I'm trying to find something that's really similar to the today. One could say that some tactical games or turn-based like XCOM bear some elements of Syndicate, but none of those games is real-time. So every game that I can think of is turn-based. So this is not quite like it. Again, that's why it deserves the place on this list. From other Kingdom managers and weird strategies, the Genesia is one of the weirdest. It's like isometric with this board game element when you would place buildings on squares on the map, and resource management and combat and weird balloons. And also you could enter a tavern or any other building for that matter and see what people had to say about your rules or governance. I know that it looks similar to the Populous and to other play games that you perhaps seen in your life, but it's really different. Mechanics are quite different. The way that you spend, it's more like a board game, really, but board game decorated with all other stuff. So in some terms also cross genre. Absolutely amazing. Realms is an absolutely amazing game from the 16-bit era. Real time, again, real time strategy. Before, people tend to say that Dune 2 was the first real time strategy. It's not true. There were real time strategies several years before that, and Realms is one of those strategies. You would not only the city governance game and the city conquest, but real time strategy, real time battles. So this is probably the very first real time war game I have ever seen in gaming. And that, because this is the very first one, it makes this mechanic weird in terms of, again, at the time, but also today doesn't have any successor. I mean, one could argue that Warhammer, Total War, or games like that are successors, and they are to some extent. In both you have city management and real-time battles with tactics and so on. But Realms featured something like arming your troops and troop morale and population happiness that converted into troop morale. So, not really. There's no successor to this game. And the presentation and the look and feel was like, at the time, everybody was thinking that it would be cool to have a game based on the Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien. Not so much as Lord of the Rings, but Silmarillion instead. And this game was really close somehow to Silmarillion. So every Tolkienist loved it, absolutely loved it. Bullfrog. So you've created. I mean, you've seen before Populous and Syndicate, but Bullfrog and Peter Molyneux created a lot of other games. One of those is Powermonger. So Powermonger came in multiple forms. There was a First World War Powermonger and Medieval Powermonger, and different versions of the game had different graphics, as you can see. But it was a 3D real-time strategy with army management, and it was a really complex game. Again, there's nothing like it. I mean, there's no game in which you can have your army and in real time go with your army throughout the world, so traverse the whole continents or sail oceans, etc., and assault villages. I would say this is like a Viking Rider simulator of sorts, because your army would behave like a band of seafaring raiders that would occupy and recruit and trade and use enemies' resources. So nothing like it today. That's why it earned its right to be on that list. Do I need to? This is yet another Bullfrog game. So, and again, like Powermonger and those games, that the same people. So these people became known as people that could create weird games. So Dungeon Keeper, the game in which you are the dungeon, not a party of adventurers. And the concept seemed silly at the time, but whoever knew at the time that this is a game from Peter Molyneux and the team from Bullfrog, everybody knew that it's going to be great, and everybody knew that it's going to be very distinctive in its setting and bizarre. So yeah, whoever played this game and whoever like possessed a chicken with an evil spell knows how it feels like. By the way, there is a lot of games that are successors to this one. Thankfully, one of those is Dungeons. Dungeons 3 is very nice. I like it very much. I'm still playing one of the campaigns in Dungeons 3. It's a quite new game. I really recommend it to anybody who likes Dungeon Keeper, because it's really worth playing. Another one that was bizarre at the time, and nobody thinks it's bizarre anymore because everybody knows this game and everybody played it, is Heroes of Might and Magic. But let me tell you, when the first game was like introduced to the market, the very Heroes of Might and Magic 1, everyone was, whoa, what a different weird mechanic, and everybody was really really interested in trying to follow up and try to do the similar mechanics. But then the 3DO created the Heroes of Might and Magic 2, and they solidified their gameplay, and everybody knows the third game. Actually, I talked to one of my childhood friends several weeks ago, and I haven't been talking to this guy for like a year, because I tend to call him one and then to ask how he's going, and I was like telling him that, well, on my side everything is the same. I'm still playing games, and I'm still into like sometimes game dev and whatnot. And he told me that he's the only game he's playing for 20 years now, almost 20 years, is the Heroes of Might and Magic 3. So people are still playing this and playing it absolutely focused and on it, and loving it still. So a very important milestone. But nonetheless, it was a weird game at the time. Also mentioned during the RPG presentation, I mentioned Birthright. Birthright was one of the Dungeons and Dragons settings, like the Ravenloft or Forgotten Realms. But Birthright is based on the fact that you, in this RPG, you're not playing just a character. You're playing the ruler of a noble blood, and the blood is magical, of course. And so that's hence the name, Birthright. You have a right by birth to rule. And again, this game is a mix of real-time strategy, a really horrible RPG content, and a great overland tactic maps. And one could argue, yeah, again, Total War is kind of like it. No, it's not, because Birthright featured a lot of ruler or kingdom management elements, like options like court opulence, that you could extend or like increase the money spent on opulence in your court to increase the diplomacy capabilities, and so on. So this is again one of a kind, even though a lot of elements of this game could be so much better. But if somebody wanted to remake this game, I wouldn't argue. I would just be very happy to see it. With all those elves, dark elves, dwarves, and all the races in there, and those interesting regions and evil entities that it had. There is a game that has so weird mechanics that it's one of the most featured games on my list today. And this game is called Commander Blood. And Commander Blood was made by the French company called Exos, and that later on created Dune. In this game, you're a space traveler that communicates with aliens. The thing is that to communicate with aliens, you have only glyphs. So let's decode it. Really don't remember what the second symbol to the left on the picture on the left means, but the first symbol is I, so the person pointing on themselves. The second is I'm not sure what, and the third is you. So I think it may be I love you or something like that. The second screen shows I love women, and there are two other glyphs that mean something. I don't know what. And but the other section says I love you, definitely. So how bizarre mechanics can get when you play the game in which you communicate with aliens by the glyph language. Of course, everybody knows this movie that was introduced several years ago about language expert that communicated with aliens by glyphs, and everybody thought that this is so original. No, it's not original, because there were so examples of this idea before. and actually executed a little better. Highly recommended if you can find it. There was also a second part of this game, which featured a lot of better graphics or better looking graphics, but with instead of this glyph communication, you would have verbal communication with phrases, and this was not the same thing. So it was no longer that fun. Uh, Alter Ego, I mentioned this also before. Revolutionary because it's a life simulator with some, of course, worst parts to it, like sexist motifs and this like masculine look of the how the social environment of Western civilization should look like. But nonetheless, the presentation and ability to choose the different paths in lives, nothing like it till the very day. And mm, uh, there's like a distinctive way why this game is so special. You need to play it to understand that this life simulator is pretty good actually. By speaking of this game, while speaking right now, I just remembered one more game that definitely requires to be on that list. I don't feature it in this presentation, but I'll try to tell you about it after the finish of what I'm trying to do now. Perhaps maybe I'll be able to share some screens about this game and tell you why it's so important. But let's then go forward. Life and Death. So Life and Death is a game about being a surgeon. And the game goal is to cure as many patients as possible and perform all possible operations that game has to offer. The first game was about body internal organs diseases. The second was about brain. And surgeon simulators I've seen over past decade were rather hilarious than simulations. This is a simulation, and this is a simulation about cutting all the layers of human body, trying to stop the bleeding with clamps, and trying to coagulate vessels, and trying to actually recognize the illness, because it happened many times to me in this game when I thought that somebody had a problem with an appendix, and actually they had some mild indigestion. So yeah, I killed some patients in that game, and those operations were extremely difficult to perform. You need to actually learn how to perform the operation, and then try to carefully use your mouse to cut body with a scalpel, unlayer the layers of human body, and so on. Nothing like it, so that's why it's odd. QTE era started with this game, which is Dragon's Lair. Dragon's Lair was actually the game that featured this was like an animated movie, but on computers and as a QTE game, so quick time event. And it appeared on many platforms, so you can see the same screen from 3 different platforms. So from the Commodore, our knight enters the room, and like the skulls are lying there on both in Commodore and the remake and in the Amiga version. Everything is animated, and everything in this game depended on how fast and which buttons you pressed. So QTE only, nothing like it. I think that everybody liked it before because of the animation, and everybody hated the QTE mechanics. So that's why you haven't seen games like this one anymore. Only what you've seen were just QTE mechanics in other games. How many simulators of wolves and lions and really a real life of wolves and lions have you seen? So 19th introduced games called Wolf and Lion, 2 separate games, in which you played as a like you started as one wolf or one lion and try to mate, like hunt, eat, breed, and repeat. So extreme educational value. You learned what those species need to survive. You strolled through savannas, hunted animals, or as a wolf, traversed European forests to find for a deer. So absolutely nothing like it. Haven't seen that type of simulation for. I've seen some moves towards making this kind of simulation. I know that some of the elements are in the zoo games that are so popular these days, but nothing like really like a wolf or lion simulator is there anymore. So weird. Also mentioned Heart of China because this is the game that featured this visual novel approach to the Western civilization. Before, the visual novels were not a thing at all, and this game is, of course, an adventure game with choices and so on. But this, because of its FMV-like visual novel premises, at the time it was a first of a kind, and nothing like it actually. I haven't seen a visual novel that had featured the real actors and pictures of real people later on. So this is really uh, like one of a kind as well. Before, in previous streams, I always talked about Elvira and Waxworks as an RPG games, which as RPG games featured cross genre elements, RPG mixed with adventure games and adventure games mixed with RPG. Weirdness of this game and of all these mechanics comes from the fact that it featured this spellcasting system that you needed to acquire components to create spells, and then you could cast spells in the land, and the fact that it blended the mechanics of adventure game and RPG game. There are more of those blends, and as you know, the probably seen on Netflix, there is a show called Shannara Chronicles on Netflix. So this is the same premise on the same book based, and the adventure games features all some of the same characters even that you can see in the TV series on Netflix. But the game has better presentation. So again, this is also an adventure RPG blend with nicely drawn pixel art graphics. So actually, also weird in that terms. But it wasn't alone. The same engine and the same approach and the mix was used in Companions of Xanth, also based on the books by Pierce Anthony, and this is the same engine. So let me just get back for a moment. As you can see, the UI is really similar, and this is actually the very similar premise. But worth knowing that there were some games that featured this mix of the blends, and they ceased to exist. There's nothing like it anymore. So these are like weird several games at the time. I mentioned goblins before, and there are Cocktail Vision created not only goblins but the Wind, the Prophecy, which is really features a very similar mechanics as a goblins game. So using items on various screens on various elements, so in some really unpredictable ways. One of the most memorable for me in this game is feeding a vampire bat with a strawberry, like Moon Logic, but I remembered this one. Weirdness, it comes from the mechanics but also from the premises. So this is again the French game featuring a lot of weird characters, almost human-like, princesses and princes and so on are also fishy. So don't this girl that you can see on the screen there is also bizarre in some ways. So another screens from the Wind, the Prophecy like features some of those characters. I don't really So I think that they stand for themselves. Uxie and Orbi brothers are very odd. So also those wizards, absolutely one of a kind. But goblins, I mentioned goblins before as a weirdness of the setting, but now there is a weirdness of the mechanic of the same game. This is the Goblins 3, and I wanted to show you that there were some intricately designed puzzles and based on the operation with environments. So in this screen, I wanted to show 3 different screens that are different because of their color, and that color is made by the protagonist by putting will-o'-the-wisps of the desired color into this bowl held by the skeleton. So on the purple one, blue and red will-o'-the-wisps are placed in the bowl. On the red one, only the red one. And on the green one, the blue and the yellow. And the thing is that when you played a little with those will of the wisp, it changed completely the level. So on the red one, you can see there is a vampire lured out from the top right corner because of the reddiness of the environment. But it's no longer there when the environment is green or purple. So there were some really clever ways of interacting with the environments and really difficult puzzles. I mean, you needed to accomplish several things or repeat several things in some different manner to accomplish something. So in this case, it was changing the color of the light of the environment. Also, not only this, there were some extremely interesting puzzles that feature hands. So on the one to the left, you could play with a form of chess by placing protagonist on the board, and the other one you had an alchemy lab in which you needed to cook something or create some concoction. So I've said again, I'm not sure if you've seen that game, such a game before. This is something that, therefore, I named it Goblins Likes, because this is like nothing else was like it. I've seen the Goblins remake after some time, but that was not it. Cryo, so Exos, the guys that made this Commander Blood with glyphs, created then changed into Cryo. They changed their name and created a lot of interesting games that were featured during the adventure game panel. So the KGB conspiracy takes place in the Russia during the transition period, during the Perestroika, when you're a KGB officer trying to find the culprit behind some crime and find the conspiracy, but also very dark, moody Russian Moscow's atmosphere in that game. I wanted to play something like that because it was like one hit game, one time game. I mean, there was another one that's like very similar to this one in some cases. I mean, Dune, but apart from the KGB and Dune, there's no adventure game that done anymore. So that's a pity. Floor 13. Very dark game. Look at the screenshot to the left. Those are tools of the secret government organization that protects democracy. So this is like a very controversial game because Floor 13 is this secret organization employed by the Great Britain government in this game to deal with the problems. The problems never have to be caught by newspapers. You need to operate in the shadows. So you're like this secret government's organization that tortures people, kidnaps people, kills people just to make resolve the difficult problems for politicians. So nobody approached this subject this way anymore. I haven't seen a game like that. After the Floor 13, this is not a particularly good game, but it's really interesting and really bizarre because of the setting and mechanics it has. Mechanics are based on sending your troops, your agents, to perform various tasks. So as you can see in the screenshot, there is surveillance, pursuit, interrogation, and so on. I mentioned this KGB game at another day, a game that's really, for me, it's one of the most important games. I love it so much. Music that you can hear right now is from this game. So Dune, another one by Cryo. Uh, Strategy, real-time adventure game mix. Nothing like this one. Um, that's why I needed this on the list. Also, the fact that Dune universe is taking plus 2000, 20,000 years in the future makes the science fiction environment really bizarre, both architecturally, culturally. They are like 20,000 mentally years away from us, and books shows it really greatly. I hope that the show that's being created right now, the new Dune adaptation, will be equally great. I will be definitely a very harsh judge of it because I love this universe so much. Some more screenshots of the Dune. As you can see, there's like talking to characters, trying to get some information from them, or giving orders, or directly learning something, or telling them something to do. Also on the map, there's multiple things happening on this screenshot there. So you can see the two ecology oriented tribes planting plants in one of the sieges, so foresting Dune. And there is another siege to the right, which contains two teams of spice harvesters equipped with ornithopters and three armed units of Fremen Fedaykin fighters who would protect those. And also there is some obscure village of smugglers to the right. This weird shape. So there is of course one troop marching on the left top. So real-time strategy adventure game. Some more screenshots from Dune because this is worth it. I absolutely love the art and PixArt. I love the fact that the gradients are being used to show the passing time, and the sky colors are absolutely magnificent. So I absolutely agree with Chani saying that it's a beautiful sunset today. Yeah, yes, it's absolutely. And of course, characters are bizarre. So, because like Mentats, human computers like Tufir Hawat to the right bottom, by the very occupation of this person makes him bizarre, and Harkonnen Kapitan looks like a living skeleton. So that's how bizarre things are. I mentioned things like Midwinter before. That this is mechanics are weird because this is like a part simulation, part RPG, part strategy game about a person that tries to survive in the winter post-apocalyptic world, trying to unite people against the evil militaristic despot who rules over the island. And mechanics were there's one distinctive thing about this mechanics. Everything was done in the turns, which are real-time events, which were shown by those watches that you can see on the screen. So when you were skiing or doing something in the open world, the watch would show you how many minutes passed. So, for example, you had a 1 hour to ski, and you could ski from 10 to 11 o'clock. And after, when the watch reached 11 o'clock, then the game would return to the tactical screen, because when your first character was skiing, the other character that you had control over could be doing something else. So the time was set up again at 10 o'clock, and you could do in the same time something else with some other characters. So you could like synchronize time, and time synchronization had a huge impact on the gameplay and how you could synchronize all the people that you could control. This is something unprecedented and never seen before. And again, Archimedes Dynasty is special and odd because it was a post-apo in the sea premises, so underwater Wing Commander like simulation with trading and plot and everything. So it's worth mentioning that it was interesting because of this underwater setting. And Waterworld games are not quite common and never were. So it's really good to know that there's some title there for somebody that has like if you watch the show called Sequest in the 90s, and then you know what I'm talking about. This is kind of Sequest like experience. There were other weird blends of genres. As you can see, the Alcatraz and Hostages was a game about which featured a lot of multiple modes in the same playthrough. So you had a side scroller in which you had to escape guards, or as a SWAT officer escape the terrorist lights, and then there you had a section in which you had to climb the building, completely differently presented. There you had a section of the sniper in which you had to eliminate some enemies at the same time, and there you had a section in which you had to infiltrate in first-person perspective the rooms there. So this kind of genre blending doesn't happen anymore. Again, in games, it just doesn't, and that's why I put a lot of those games on the list that actually are doing that. Again, Sid Meier's concepts, and of course I mentioned this game before, which is Sword of the Samurai. Sid Meier's concepts how to blend, merge real time sequences or arcade sequences of fighting the katana with visual novel like selections and RPG like skills and map traversing are unprecedented. And again, I would love to see somebody making a remake of this game, of this particular game. And thanks to the Ghost of Tsushima, I kinda have my samurai fantasy somewhat fulfilled. But the thing is that Ghost of Tsushima features a predefined character, which in this game you could create your own character and then pick your own province, and you had a different options that because of the island on which you lived, on the state in which you served. So this is like a simulation more than anything. The same thing I mentioned about this agent game, which is Covert Ops. The same thing actually. So how to blend those elements together. So this text selection boxes, item management, skill management, and having this as a simulation really with arcade elements. So Covert Ops, again, I would love to see the remake of this. There are some legal issues about this because some people attempted to make remakes of those games and they were just cancelled and forcibly cancelled, I think, from outside. So that's what it is. Of course, Midwinter 2, I mentioned the same thing before, that the fact that you could blend this tactical simulation shooter and RPG and tactical combat and huge area and maps, so the strategic element and negotiation with NPCs, absolutely. I think that some of the open world games are trying to mimic this today. So it's not like completely forgotten. But those open world games are never strategy based. So they never feature the strategy element about it. And that's what I kind of miss. I wanted to play a game in which I am a commander or an agent that organizes some resistance, like in this game. Both real time with shooting and dialogues with NPCs and RPG elements. That's what I'm missing. This had to be on this list. This is another cross blend which features simulation a little, strategy game a little, and the SimCity like city builder, and of course negotiating with aliens. This is a game by a Hungarian developer that features is about actually trying to return to Earth from some remote colony, meeting aliens and trying to fight the alien threat. So the colony management was really complex, multiple buildings, mines, shafts, and you had also various talents of your subordinates. So the better pilot you employed, the better your pilots were in battles. Also multiple alien interactions, so some aliens could help you, some aliens could kill you, some begged for help. Really interesting adventure mode with strategy involved, and a lot of things could go wrong by playing this game. But this game had a continuation, so this continuation by the same company actually was Imperium Galactica 1 and 2. So this is the same idea, but with better graphics and more content. So isometric buildings, energy levels management, new designs for tanks, ships, fleet management in space, and so on. Very interesting strategy and also adventure element, because there was a personal element to this game. Then as a space commander or space station commander, you received correspondence from your family. There was some personal immersion elements to this. Does anybody remember the Parappa the Rappa? A completely different shift to a completely different thing. So there was a rap game in which so this is a game about rapping. And our Parappa is being taught by the Master Onion how to rap. And this is actually a QTE kind of game about rapping. So I think that this is the only game. I mean, I think that you could compare it to the Guitar Hero or those games that are QTE really, or about clicking or pushing things at the right time. And this is exactly this. And but everything, the presentation, the cartoonish character, the onion masters, and the bizarreness of all it, and the storyline behind it, which is cheesy. That like demanded to be on this list. Do I need to remind you about this one? Not really. I believe everybody knows this already. So Princess Maker 2, how to raise your daughter to be a sexual parasite and monster, or an angel believing in God and behaving greatly on the supper when she's invited to the king's court. It's your choice. So I kind of explored all options. Sexual predators that pretends to be very religious is also a really interesting option. A lot of stats. You probably never played something like it, and I have never seen anything like it afterwards. So yeah. Some screenshots about what I just said, that there are options depending on how you play, and multiple endings, of course. Let's get back to the German dev scene. So there was an absolutely marvelous game about being a TV station manager. It's called Mad TV. There were several parts of this game, and it was a typically 90s TV station, so you could have play movies like Karate Kid or Good Morning Babylon or Star Wars or Robin Hood, the King of Thieves, and as you can see, there is a on the screenshot there is a Life of Brian by Monty Python's being played, and the commercial of Baguette is being placed in the middle. Because that the mechanic was about earning money initially from commercials. So you would sign up the contract, how many people will watch the movie, and if the equal amount of people watch the commercial, or the agreed number of people watch the commercial, you would get the money. So, and then you would produce your own TV shows. So you can see on the screenshot to the left that the producer is telling player that the production um, actually I'm not that good in German, but that is going to be ended at 23 tomorrow. Today. Yep. So the thing is, what I loved is the fact that the UI was based on those two TVs, and you had like TV screen on the left, which showed you what's currently being played, and like the view from the inside of TV with lamps and so on. That if some that looked like somebody was actually watching the family in front of the TV. So you can see the demographics of your TV program. And this was amazing. Everything happened in the block, apartment block, in which people would, different people would live. You could get additional rooms for your TV station by even sabotaging some like laundry, or even Desert Powers Embassy. So absolutely weird denizens of the story of this apartment block. The goal of the game was actually getting a most prestigious prize for TV station called Sammy, and getting the heart of this white, like blonde-haired presenter that can be seen on the screen there. So there was competition. Two competitions actually, competitive TV stations in the same block. So you would actively in real time fight with those people. You would even leave the bombs for them. So this is like a really hilarious and cool competition, and then a really cool TV station manager. More than that, more managers than that. I'm sure if you heard about Pizza Tycoon. So Pizza Tycoon is something that happens when you mix the restaurant management with mafia and mob governance. So like Italian world comes together to some extent. Yeah. So the thing is, you could in this game you could create your pizzas, you could create your own recipes, and you govern the pizza place basically. And then there was some mafia activities as well to get rid of the competition. Really cool manager. The same goes about Theme Hospital. I specifically picked the screenshots that showed how weird and bizarre and hilarious this game was. So on the biggest screenshot, yeah, I've like the same here. This game is absolutely marvelous. I know that there are some remakes on the scene as well, but this was absolutely amazing. So as you can see, every visitor to this hospital is unhappy because there is so many like vomits lying on this and bananas and whatever. So the cleaners are not doing their job there. Somebody there is almost dead because there is a person that has like half skull, half face in that hospital. There's absolutely horrendous hospital. And look what this advisor doctor says. Phew, looks like the virus that caused that vomit wave was pretty much died down. Keep your hospital clean in the future. Yeah, it's kind of, this is the level of uh, fun you can expect from this game. Of course, the illnesses are artificial, like this guy with the large head on the picture. It's not the real condition. We know there are some conditions that make the head larger, like the water in the head or something. But this condition is actually had been infatuated with air, and there is a machine to pull the air out of the head. So whoever played this game knows that how picky your doctors become with time, and they demand more and more money and less work time. So this is like a pretty good simulation of every hospital, I'd say. Another weird tycoon manager game that mixes the hard competition with building and developer company is Constructor. It had some new version created several years ago, but I'm not sure if the old one is still available on GOG, because of the new version of the game being in development, there are some legal issues about the old remake. But I bought it on GOG several years ago, and I have still, I've got it still because I already bought it. I'm not sure if it's still listed on GOG, but if not, there's this new one, I guess, and building houses, renting houses to people, to different demographics, and expect different outcomes. To build more houses, upgrade kitchens, and so on. It's so interesting and fun, and of course you can play this game with some friends. So in real time, you would have a competition that competes for the same plot, building plots, and try to like remove you from the market. Really interesting. Another hospital game, something that I think only in German, because it's another German game is being. It's about hospital, like Lud Hospital Manager. Really interesting content. So as you can see, there are a lot of hilariousness along with some erotic and pastiche representations. Really cheesy in some places, but really overlooked, and kind of looked at when you started, you could, I don't know, buy previously used and previously owned scalpels. So this is like this really hilarious and comedy relief part of it. Another German game. This is absolutely about, like, I left it to the end because this is a Lula the Sexy Empire is a game about porn industry, and the thing is that everybody says, "Wow, this is a porn industry, so probably stupid, fishy, or something." Actually, this is a quite cool manager, and like if somebody's into the business or movie development games with some cheesiness to it, this is actually a really cool manager. And actually, this was actually, I think, 1998 or 1999 when it was released. Actually, this game features 3 modes. There is a mode when you do like some amateur content, so to speak, the full-blown porn industry, movie industry stage, and the stage in which you, I think, manage the network of sex shops or something. So really fun manager if somebody is into like those money-based games, but also bizarre and odd because of the content it represents. So this is it. But then I promised you one more thing, and I want to find out how to share it with you, because there is the difficulty of sharing this is based on the fact that I am using the this tool that I don't really know so good, but let me find it. So I'll just try to find some browser, open the browser, and maybe I'll be able to share the browser with you, because this is so much worth it. So let me just find a way. Okay, okay, just a second. Um, yeah, just a second, just a second. Okay, I think that I've got it. Therefore, yeah, I think that you can see the browser, but I'm not sure if you see the content of the browser. It doesn't show. Okay, so there's a problem then. I don't think I'll be able to show you this then. But there's a game called The Fool's Errand. So I'm going to, you know what? I'm going to paste the link into the chat window, and then you'll be able to see at least the search window for this game, the content that is displayed when you look at the Google. So Fool's Errand is absolutely weird and absolutely unlike any other game. If you could open this link, then you'll see at least some screenshots. Why? That's because the Fool's Errand is completely, totally based on tarot. Yep. And not only that, this is the game that blends tarot, interesting puzzles, and multiple different types of puzzles, and storytelling, so reading content, into one game. So in other words, what you need to do in this game is, and here goes another URL. Just a second. I need to find. Okay. Okay. So this is going to be a Twitter post. This game is about getting a map together about the journey of the fool, so the very first tarot card, and player needs to find the route of the fool, the real route that the fool had traversed, and the map itself is a puzzle. So not only it's a puzzle, you need to like put the pieces on specific places, but you can earn the pieces only if you solve other puzzles. So there are puzzles based on the parts of stories that you need to read. There are puzzles that are crossword puzzles. There are puzzles, really multiple ways of things to solve, really, and that makes this game completely underrated and obscured by the time. But if you are into puzzle games with some really interesting challenge, then go ahead and play Fool's Errand. Because that will make you really, really happy. So this is the game that should be during this presentation, but I just kind of forgot about this. Sorry. So we reached the end of this presentation. It's again almost 4 hours now. So a lot of talking, hopefully interesting. So I think that this is the time to wrap it up. I haven't seen a lot of activity on the chat today. So hopefully you liked it. If not, then sorry. But this is again the thing about weird. The word weird is highly subjective, and I of course presented things that are weird for me, and that might mean that some things that I presented are completely not weird or completely perfect for you. Of course, there are a lot of others. Oh, thank you, Melina. Thank you. Uh, um, Much appreciated. The only thing that so everybody knows that later years, like post 90s, 2000s, they have more and more bizarre and weird games. Uh, and after the Steam arrives to the picture, on Steam with all the asset flips and Steam small games and indie content, you have a lot of weird content there. And that would be completely different subject. But as you can see, in the 90s, the weird games are more serious. Nobody is trying to uh, like do a shitty game with funny content just for the fact that they're making weird game with the stupid premises. No. The weirdness comes from the fact that somebody wants to do something original, mostly, and that's why those games from the 90s are kind of more solid, and the weirdness is consistent, and weirdness is there for a reason. It's thought through. That's why, again, those games can shine a little bit more than this asset flip content or the things that are just repetitive, like today. So that's it, and hopefully, hopefully you'll play those games because they're worth it. um, in the world of the AAA industry, giving you a lot of the same repetitive content over and over again, those can be quite nice distractions. So especially when you're trying to find something different, that something weird. So let's wrap it up. Thank you very much for tuning in. Have a great evening, and of course we can talk a little about this more to whatever to your heart desire on the group. And yeah, so thank you very much, and till the next time. And thank you for listening to me, making me share this because I really like doing this. Have a great evening, everyone. Cheers.